Yeah, I'm good, man.
All right, cool. What's up, y'all? Jabrel here from JTC Conversations, and we have our second episode here. We're making progress, guys. We're moving. I finally got some guests. I suckered somebody else into saying yes to come out of my show. We have Zach from zachscomicbox. How are you doing, man?
Dude, I'm living the dream. And you didn't sucker me in, man. If anything, I hit you up to get on your pod because I love
That's
hearing my
true.
own voice. I love
That's
talking
progress.
about comics. And you got enough of a following that I just showed up there. And that's really, that's all it was. I just slid in the DMs and here I am
Hey,
appearing on your channel and on your podcast.
that's progress. If I don't have to bully people into coming to my show anymore, that is
Absolutely.
progress. I'll take
And
it.
it's not like a pity in like, oh yeah, I guess I'll go on your podcast,
With your 20 followers, I'll allow it. But
Yeah, I don't know. No, but I'm here, man, and I'm super excited to talk about what we got to talk about.
yeah, we have a lot to cover, and I'm very, very excited. But I always like to kick off with a little bit of a background on the person I'm talking to. So I just want to know, what is your background with comics? Where did you start? Where did you go from there? Let me know a little bit about your history.
Yeah, man. So I started collecting comics when I was 9.
Wow.
The first, so randomly, and this is gonna verge into the semi-problematic, and I promise I'm not a problematic person. When I first got into comics, my dad randomly was like, "Hey, there's a signing for this artist at the local comic shop. Like, do you want to go?" And I had always liked like Batman, Superman, um, things that when you're a young boy in America, you tend to like very early on in your life. And so he decided that we would go to the local comic shop and see this artist. Well, that artist turned into be, Ethan Van Sciver, who like
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
he was fine then, as far as I know, but
As
he's
much
he's
as you do,
he's
yeah.
very yeah, he's very different now. I actually have right there, you can see that's the poster that I got signed by
Oh,
him that
wow.
day. I've had it since then. But I took a look around, and the first comics I made a video about this the other day. The first comic I ever got was the Blue Beetle #1, where Jaime Reyes finally took over as Blue Beetle. That was the first comic
What a
book I got
start.
for
Wow.
whatever reason. Made no sense to my 9-year-old brain. Like it just was. And the second being Punisher Euro hit number like 7 of 9 or 9 of 12, something like that. No clue what was going on. I just thought it had a cool cover. It was Punisher. I was like, dude, this is badass. Like, I'm gonna absolutely pick this up. And so I got my poster signed and got those, but I didn't really start seriously collecting because we were kind of lower income growing up. Like
Yep.
money was kind of tough. So convincing my parents, who didn't even give me an allowance, to allow me to buy comics every week was not an easy task, and it just would have been impossible. So the compromise was, for my birthday or Christmas one year, they got me a Marvel encyclopedia, and I read through that thing like crazy. So I wasn't collecting comics, but I was learning about characters, learning about storylines, learning about power sets, and things like that. And then finally, when I got to be about 12, yeah, 12, my cousin Aaron, shout out to Aaron, Josh's comic books on Instagram, great dude. He's my cousin. He had a friend who worked at Marvel and a friend that worked at DC, and they used to send him free comic books. And he's a huge comic book fan. He's been collecting his whole life too. So he sent me just boxes and boxes. It was when the flat rate boxes first came out, so you could just send like 100 pounds worth of stuff in like this very small package if you really needed to. So he sent me just boxes and boxes, and it was all Dark Reign era Marvel.
Oh,
So I'm
wow.
reading Dark Avengers, Dark Wolverine, Thunderbolts, Avengers Initiative, all that, and seeing Norman Osborn, who I knew as the Green Goblin in this outdated Marvel encyclopedia. Now I'm reading, well, he's president and he's the
Yeah.
Iron Patriot. Like who
Yeah.
who the hell's Iron Patriot, right? And that was really what solidified my love for comics, was getting those, and I reread those over and over and over again, missing issues, duplicates of some, and I started, unfortunately, and this is just much to my detriment, I gave away my Dark Avengers #1 that was in really good shape because I wanted my friend to start reading comics, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure he just threw it away at some point. But that was it. That was my background. And since then, I've been hooked. When I had the money, I was buying single issues and just collecting them, collecting whole runs, collecting sets. And I didn't really start collecting again in earnest, meaning like every time I'm at the getting every issue at the LCS, until maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. Once I graduated college, I was like, okay, I have money. now. Like I have disposable income.
Yeah.
Like let me go to the comic book shop, and that's really what's where I'm at now.
Yeah, that's sick. So it sounds like you've been pretty consistently like a single issue person. Like, do you keep it
Yeah,
mostly to single issues?
yeah, almost always. I go every. I'm a bad comic book fan in that I go probably twice a month to the comic book
Okay.
shop
So
versus
bulk.
every
Yeah.
week. Yeah, but and much to my future wife's detriment that I spend so much money at one time. But yeah, I always would go get single issues. I still do, but I will pre-order a Omni or a trade if it's something interesting,
Yep.
or if it's like a reprint of something older. But also when you go to like Ollie's or like Book Depots or library sales and stuff, they're not going to have single issues. So you
No.
always got to find an interesting graphic novel to get, to fill the void, fill the cracks. Like
Yeah,
was it in Paul Blart? He's like peanut butter fills the cracks in your heart, go
exactly.
away pain. It's like that. Like any bad thing that happens is definitely solved by a Green Lantern Volume 1 New 52 trade that's like beat up and has a sticker on it,
Some
like
random beater issue. Yeah.
it fixes it, dude.
Yeah, I've always been so fascinated by people and the medium that they choose to consume their content, because I've always had a very tenuous history with it. I started very young too on the single issue thing, and I've gone back and forth depending on my
Mhm.
economic situation at any given time. So
That's
when I
exactly it too.
yeah,
Yeah.
so when I was younger, like it was all like dollar bins. You just scavenge anything I can. So and nowadays this sounds insane, but yeah, I used to get all these like 70s ASM books that go for God knows how much now. But at that
Right.
time, no one wanted it. I mean, it was peak JMS, Ultimate Spider-Man. That's what people wanted.
Hmm.
Nobody wanted to read, Roger Stern, Jerry Conway stuff. So I was like,
Yeah.
sure. And so I just took whatever I can get. I had $3 for my birthday
Yeah.
or whatever, and you just get three
You've
books
got like
here.
a Jim Aparo Batman book, and now all of a sudden, like
Yeah, and you just
nobody wants
read
to
it.
talk to you on the playground, but you'll be a
Exactly,
millionaire
yeah.
one day.
And you just read it over and over again until the
Yeah.
spine. And I still have a couple of those books with the tape along the spine just
Yeah.
to hold it together. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until, yeah, I graduated high school that I went into trades, because it was literally just a space thing. I was just like, I don't have that much space. I'm moving things around. I have a dorm. Like I can only do so much. So
Yeah.
that's when I started switching to like Miles Morales trades and stuff like that. I didn't discover Omnis until way later. And then two
That's like
years
a
ago,
that's like hitting puberty. That's
oh
like
my
one of
God,
those
yeah.
things like you are not prepared for it, and then all of a sudden you discover that like omnis exist, and you're like,
Yeah, that's not a
what?
kid's game. That's not
Yeah,
a kid's
no,
game.
it's
That's
not. No, it's not, dude. It'd kill a 6-year-old if it fell on them.
I mean,
Like
totally. Yeah,
I
yeah.
have the Invincible compendiums, and those things
Me
are
too. Yeah, yeah. Those are insane.
insanely big in
Yeah.
comparison. Yeah, 100%.
It, yeah, and so like I've just always gone back and forth, and like I did the single issue thing 2 years ago, and I've pretty much consistently, and now we're talking weekly here. Like I got a poll list and
Mhm.
stuff like that, and I went from a decent amount of stack like this, so nothing too crazy, to a 6 long boxes, and I was like, okay, this is becoming untenable. You should see the faces my girl's giving me at the comic shop when I'm picking up my stuff. She's like, $70 this week, huh? And I'm like, that's
Oh,
valid.
that's where you're at. Oh, I'm much higher, bro.
Oh
I
yeah, no,
not
I
to
know.
flex. Like I don't mean that as a flex. If
No,
anything,
I
that's
I
like
wish I
a
could do
mission
more.
of shame. Like
Yeah,
I, it is unreasonable. And
70 is
like
trimmed.
you do pull lists. Do you
Yes.
not do previews? Because I'm a previews guy. Because my LCS gives me free bags and boards and 10% off if I do my previews every month.
Oh no, wait, what do you mean by previews?
Like you fill out the catalog.
Oh
You
no,
don't know
yeah.
about this?
Wait,
Yeah,
wait,
dude.
you gotta
You go
fill me in
you
here.
go through the big catalog. It's called the previews,
Okay.
and you get a Marvel sheet or a Marvel and indie sheet, and then you get a DC book, a booklet, and you fill that out every month. And it's for like 3 months in the future, or like two or 3 months in the future. And so then they just pull whatever you ordered, and you just pay for that. It's like a Scholastic book club thing.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're
It's
talking
almost
about.
exactly like that. But I
Yeah,
get
yeah,
discounts and stuff at my LCS. That's why I do it every month.
yeah. Definitely
I
no
used to have a
discounts
I
for
used to
my
have a pull list, and then they messed it up all the time. And now I'm like,
yeah.
hey, I paid for this. You better give it to me.
So basically, I'm somewhere in between. So yeah, I have things that auto pull, but I do have weekly pre-orders that I do. But it's like a variant game for the most part.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's no financial incentive to doing it with my LCS. I love my LCS, but
Okay.
they are not the ones that are going to help you out
Dude, in
economically.
this
Basically,
economy, oh
I
my
get it
gosh.
though.
Like my LCS is barely staying above water. I love those guys. I think they're
Exactly.
great. And the guys that work there really do care. But unfortunately, just in our area where they're at, like they're barely keeping it afloat, which sucks. But that's why I also don't feel bad about going in there and giving them all my money, because it's like, well, I get something I love and you get to, put food on
It's
your table for you and your kids. So
Yeah, it's a tough
hard to
game.
complain.
The margins are like razor thin. It's a
Yeah,
quote unquote dying industry. It's a dying art form,
we'll
quote
see.
unquote. It's not,
Yeah.
but
Well, I'm a bowler too, so I
yeah.
bowl, and people are
Oh,
like,
so
"Oh,
you
it's a
get
dying
it.
sport." I'm like, "But is it? Like,
It don't look like it when I go in there.
bowlers are gonna bowl." Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
no, it's one of those things where yeah, I go in there and there's always people buying it. The variant game, like I mean, I just see people stacking up on 5 copies of the same book. So it looks pretty healthy from my perspective. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it and $70 was trimmed. So like I was like, okay,
yeah.
I have to
That's
pay
no, that
respect.
that's true. That's true.
And I just
Absolutely.
bought my first house and it's not the biggest. And so I was like, okay, I need to like cut this back severely. So I'm like, okay, back to trades temporarily. I feel like I'm
Right.
always going to be ebbing and flowing depending because the variance is what gets me. Like I follow
Mhm.
certain artists. So like Nakayama and like Art Germ. And I just like they get me every time. And that cannot be replicated in the collected editions. Like, they have the covers
Yeah.
in the back and stuff like that, but it's not the same thing. So
Yeah,
it's
unless they
tricky.
do like the hip hop covers that Marvel did not that long ago.
Oh,
I
yeah.
actually
Yeah.
it's probably about a decade ago at this point,
It was
but
before I was doing, yeah.
they collected all of them. I think it was 2013. They collected all of them because they had like Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, which is my favorite DMX album. They had the X-23 variant with that. They had the Squirrel Girl, was it Wolf, Tyler the Creator variant
Yeah. Yeah.
cover. There are more. Like I have it on my shelf over there. I could go grab it if we really wanted to, but like it's I totally get it because those variants, some of them can be so cool, but unless they're collected in a book like that, some of them just like you're not going to see them ever in their full glory if you
Exactly.
buy a collected version, edition.
Yeah, yeah, which is why I kind of love these little mini collections they do. Like Poison Ivy just did it, Catwoman just did it, where it's just artwork. And like for
Mhm.
anybody who wasn't able to get all these really, because a lot of them are
Yeah.
incentives too, and I cannot do the incentive variant game like I do. My budget is not there right now.
Well, but the reality is too,
Yeah,
it's like, dude, if my LCS is having to order 100 issues of a book that I'm the only one buying, like that's not,
it's not going to
that's
work.
not financially viable for them or me
Exactly.
because I'm gonna have to buy all those books. And so yeah, I totally get that. I am like a B cover person though. I almost always get the B cover.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Me too. With a small exception, like Immortal X-Men, keep it A. Like I
Oh
love
yeah, always, always.
gorgeous.
Or like the Fantastic Four series from
Oh yeah, the Ryan North one.
Ryan North. Yeah, it's like, dude, I'm gonna get an Alex Ross cover every time. Same with Immortal, right?
Yeah,
If you're not
exactly.
getting Immortal A cover, like you're doing something wrong. And honestly, the both Zdarsky Daredevil series, I
Oh
will
yeah.
always get that issue one or cover one for
But
sure.
yeah, yeah, but there's the opposite side of the spectrum too. Like you couldn't pay me to get a cover A of an ASM book. Like it's not happening. Like I haven't
Yeah.
touched a cover A for that for God knows how long.
I haven't cared about a Spider-Man cover in quite a long time. So I think that's one of the only ones where I'm like, give me the A.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
yeah,
care.
we're in the trenches over there. Like
I'd say
it's
Batman also has some really good A covers, but they also have some really good B and
those
C
Delatos
covers
though.
when they have them. Yeah, yeah.
The Delatos get me every time. But speaking of just collecting in general, I always like to ask because I'm very publisher agnostic, and some
Mhm.
people are not. So, do you have a publisher preference at all, or are you really like agnostic?
Um, I'm pretty agnostic.
Okay, yeah,
Leaning towards theist.
okay.
That makes
I
sense.
love.
So like I have preferences, but I think it varies. I think
Yep.
right now where I'm at, I really like DC characters more. Like when I'm reading my DC books, I'm like,
Yeah.
these characters are better than in the Marvel series I'm reading. But the teams I like and the characters I like at Marvel, I
Yeah.
like more than I like at DC. So it is this ebb and flow. But for the most part, like I'm not gonna bash one or the other. They're
Of
both good at
course.
different things.
Yeah.
I heard Kevin Smith say it one time on Comic Book Men. He said Marvel is science comics that have magic, and DC is magic comics that have science. And so
That's a
every
great
time I
one.
think
Yeah.
about it that way, and I've been living but with like explaining it that way for years now at this point, because Comic Book Men's been canceled for a
Yeah.
long time. But I've always thought about it that way. And so whenever I need my magic focused or my fantasy focused thing, I'll read the Flash, which is weird because it's like based in science. Like there are things that are based in science in DC books,
Yeah.
and
Totally.
same with things are based in magic in Marvel books. But I don't know. It just feels that way. And I don't know if I'm crazy. You agreed with me when I initially said it, so maybe you agree. But
Yeah.
I when I need that itch, I go to one or the other. But also, if I had my way, every character would be creator owned, and therefore I would be able to actually support the creators rather than a publisher. Because I buy a lot of indies nowadays, maybe not as much as I'd like, but I really am enjoying like Vanish was one from Cates and Stegman, and
Yeah.
then Newburn. I'm loving. It's back from hiatus, loving it. So that's Darsky and Jacob. I think it's Jacob Phillips, and they have an advertisement for their Substack in the back of it, and that's
I
a
love that.
image book. And so it's like I like that these creators are getting to put out their own stuff, and I'm a big fan of backing comics on Kickstarter and everything. Shout out to TS at Can't Be Killed Comics.
Yeah.
As of like today of recording, he met his
Oh, you hit the
crowdfunding
3,000?
goal.
Oh,
Yeah, he
wow.
hit the
That's awesome.
crowdfunding goal for Tokyo Fire. So please go pick up Tokyo Fire number 1, 2, and 3. I got all three
Absolutely.
covers. Um, I think it's awesome. Like I love backing. I'm the same with board games too. I'll always back a creator, creator owned indie board game because that's so much more interesting than Monopoly. But going back to publisher, I'm agnostic, but I really just like supporting creators more than anything. If I could, I would only buy indie comics, but characters I love are from the publishers and they have easier access, honestly.
Yeah, no, we're almost exactly the same. Where the only preference I have is whatever is economically best for whatever the creator is are that I support, whatever at
Yeah.
any given time. So
Yeah.
if Tom King's like, hey, buy my DC book, I'm at DC. But
Yeah.
if somebody else, so I follow writers and I follow characters, and
Hmm.
because my number one and two in terms of characters happen to be Wonder Woman and Miles Morales, I'm always going to be associated with both sides. Like, unless somehow the most magical thing in the world happens and somehow Marvel buys out Wonder Woman, it's not going to happen. Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
support both
Yeah.
to some degree. And yeah, I've always had trouble with the whole like I only read this because I feel like there are things that only want like you can't get from both sides. Like you kind of have to have like a piecemeal approach from all the
Hmm.
major publishers to get that full experience. Like what, for example, Distillery just did with the Devil's Cut,
Hmm.
like that. I'm not seeing that anywhere else. Like that
Yeah.
prestige format, it's almost like the best of all the worlds. You have like the form factor of a black label DC book with all the different creators. It's serving a
Hmm.
little bit of image. Like I'm
Yeah.
that's what I mean. It's like a piecemeal approach. Like, and then I'm reading like Ryan North's Fantastic Four you just talked about, and it's got this almost like episodic sci-fi type vibe.
Yeah.
Reminds me of
It's
childhood
very
watch. Yeah,
monster of the week. And I'm
I
really
love that.
enjoying that because I think one of the things I'm really getting from X books, which we'll talk about later,
Yeah,
is that that's all arc based. It's not, you cannot read from issue to issue and just pick up. Whereas with this Fantastic Four series, you pick up an issue and like it could be issue 5. And you're
exactly.
kind of like in it
Yeah,
already, and there's not much you need to know. And so I'm really enjoying that. I think we talked about in the Discord we're both in about Distillery, and I think I said something along the lines of like I'm okay paying a premium for their books if it means that all those artists not only get to keep the rights to the stories they make, but also get to have money for healthcare and living wage and not having to work a day job so they can focus on comics. Like
yeah,
that's the dream, right? Like I don't care. And in an ideal world, DC and Marvel would do the same thing. Like I don't need 7 Bat books, but but I could get 3 and pay double the price. But that means that one, they're higher quality books because creators are not having to spread themselves so thin, working on so many titles because they have to make ends meet. They get to actually focus on one because they're paid a living wage and they're
exactly.
able to focus on one thing. And I think what Distillery is doing with that approach is amazing. And you know, $10 is a little high. If you say someone like, hey,
Yeah,
that's a $10 comic book, people will look at you sideways, especially older comic book fans who remember when they were 25 cents. But it gets 88 pages. Like it's
yeah.
88 pages. I think that's
Beautiful
what issue
build
one
too.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, dude, 88 pages of premium cardstock, premium paper, great ink, great production quality, and I'm supporting this creator. I'm sold. If I can find it, like I'm gonna go out and get it like tomorrow for sure.
Exactly. That's what I always tell myself. Like, because of course there's that initial sticker shock. I think that's a very natural
Yeah.
reaction. But then I just have to like recalibrate my brain a little bit, and it's like that's the cut out the exec tax. That's all that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty
It's
much.
just
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a premium just to get him out of the way.
Yeah. Take
Get
that
the
CE.
yeah,
Yeah. Take that CEO's bonus and just
exactly.
pocket that
Just
bitch
divide
right there.
it.
Like
And
that's
I'm like,
exactly what we
oh,
need to do.
then I'm more than happy to do it, and then, so that's
Yeah.
why I love to do it. And boy, do I wish that there could be like from a DC or a Marvel, like, hey, you pay an extra $2, we ensure that that money gets to them.
Yeah.
I'll do what I got to do, because it's like a reluctant. I reluctantly support some of the bigger publishers because I love the IP that they own, but the business
Yeah.
model I do not love. I think anybody who
Well,
loves a medium would have an issue with
and
the model. Yeah,
yeah, 100%. And anybody who's a historian or understands the history of comics knows that people have been getting screwed over left, right, and center since the start
go
of
back to the
comics. I mean,
30s. Yeah,
you look at Bill Finger, right? He got totally just shafted by Bob Kane, and he was left with nothing. And he just finally, in the past couple of years, got his estate, got his name on Batman, everything. So it says like Bob Kane. It's like created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger or something along those lines,
yeah.
but it's a separate denotation, which is kind of like scummy because it's like it really was Bill Finger. So
It
like
really is. It's just
first,
them, to be
and you
honest. But
see the same with like Lee and Kirby. Like Stan Lee was a great storyteller and he was a great marketing director, basically. And Marvel would not have existed without Stan Lee, but at the same time, like Marvel and DC would not have existed without Jack Kirby because Jack Kirby was doing all the heavy lifting.
yeah,
Like he was the icon to emulate for a generation and a half of people before we started moving into like the late 80s and 90s. Like he was still being emulated for a long time. So yeah, I mean,
yeah,
if you know history of comics, everybody's getting screwed over all the time. So it's not hard not to be wary of that,
yeah.
especially when supporting a big corporation.
Yeah, it's the unfortunate, I think, like devaluing of the creative that, I mean, especially if you pay attention to other industries. Like I'm big in the music world. Like I came from the music reviewing world before I ever touched a
Mhm.
comic video in my life. And you want to talk about devaluing the creative. I mean, and
$100%.
this is pre AI stuff. So don't even get me
Yeah.
started on all of
Oh, and
that.
then
But
like the film industry.
exactly,
Yeah,
it's
all that.
just
Yeah.
and so it's that thing where it's like we want your work, but we don't want you. That
Yeah.
we want, you're a means to a byproduct. And so the
Yeah.
closer I can get to cutting all of that mess out, cutting out the fat, and just it's like me the consumer, you the creative, let's do it. Like I love
Yeah.
what you do, I want you to be able to support. I think it's so insane to me that we have these people contributing to $1 billion industries, and they're drawing and they're producing these gorgeous work, they're writing their ass off,
Mhm.
and they're struggling to pay rent. Like that's insane
Yeah.
to me. And
Yeah.
then the same IP adapted into a movie is line in the pocket of some guy who happened to buy the rights to an IP, luckily in some exchange of companies. Like that's insane. Not to
Who
get
maybe
political on
said,
you, but it's
yeah,
like it's
who maybe
insane.
said, I don't like that actor, recast them. And that's like the most that they would have done on the
Yeah,
thing. I mean, I think it's so heartbreaking. I mean, we're seeing a shift slowly, but it's really heartbreaking to see all these guys from the 70s and 80s who can't afford their medical bills and they're dying from preventable, curable things
exactly. Yeah,
because they literally cannot afford. They got no creator rights. I mean, I forget his name. Um, but he's the guy who did the font for Venom. He created the font for Venom. It's
yeah,
Chris Eliopoulos or something along those lines. Great illustrator. He did the Venom logo, which has been used on countless things. It's used in the movies, right?
yeah.
He got paid like $75 for it.
It's insane.
And it's like he's like, I'm not saying that to complain. Like I got paid for the job I did and I have a successful career as an illustrator. But like, do you know how much money that has generated over the 30 years that Venom's been a character? Like it's almost outright atrocious that those that people who contribute in such a vital way are not able to provide for themselves or provide for their families, and they're being exploited like that. I mean,
Yeah,
again, not to get too political, but this is the state of the industry of what we're
exactly.
talking
Yeah,
about. I
no,
mean,
it's
that's the
facts.
reality for a lot of these people.
And it's not like we're talking about, I think, some like weird conceptual, the money's not there. No, the money's there. It's
No, it
just
is.
funneled in the wrong places. That's the all.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
100%.
I think it would be
Yeah,
one thing if we're talking about like the newspaper industry. Like there's only so much money to go around. It's in rough shape. Digital happened. No, we're talking
yeah,
about something that on a regular basis is producing billions of dollars, and you
yeah,
probably got a handful of people pocketing most of that. That's crazy to me.
yeah.
And I don't think
Well,
it's an
but then
insane
it's
take to say like,
no.
can we not do that anymore?
Yeah, not at all. And I think that even from a business standpoint, you look at DC, if they're like, hey, we don't have the money to pay creators, right?
Yeah.
We don't. They put out so many garbage books that
Trim.
like have no quality to them. And it's like, look, I'm glad that someone is getting a job in comics writing this book, even if nobody cares about it or it's not selling well. That's great. That person got a foothold into comics as a way to say, I created this thing. That's awesome. I love that. But the reality is, like I said with Bat books, even like, do we really need as many Bat books as we have? There's
Yeah.
not a Booster Gold like running series, like ongoing. There's barely a Doom Patrol ongoing, which was a super successful show. There's not a Swamp Thing ongoing anymore.
There's a
Like,
whole Wonder Woman family untouched,
yeah,
basically.
but also like some of those characters, like, and this is more from a craft standpoint. It's like some characters are just created to create a character because
Yeah.
everybody wants to create the new Harley Quinn. I saw a comment on Reddit that basically said it was a post and it was like so many of these characters have been created and thrown away. And I disagreed with some of them. Like Punchline was one of them. Punchline's not gotten thrown away. She has her own Night Terror
Oh yeah,
series.
she just got a
She's like,
tie-in, so yeah.
she's doing fine for where she's at. Then they're like Ghostmaker was one of them. He's created for Batman the Night, right? Which was a mini explaining, Bruce's journey. Well, Ghostmaker is now the leader of Batman Incorporated. Like, and that book is doing well and is one of the best books in DC right now.
Yeah, Ed
Can you
Brisson's going
really
crazy. Yeah.
say? Can you really say that character is not doing well? Like, he's a main part of this
Yeah.
specific part of the storyline of Batman Incorporated too. But someone commented on that post and said everybody wants to create the new Harley Quinn. And it's the truth. Everybody wants to create this new character that's going to be a huge hit. Even more recently, like you look at Damian Wayne, everybody wants to create the new Damian Wayne. And that's not the case. Not all of them are going to be a winner. And so unfortunately, they create all these series to highlight these things. And unfortunately, some of them do do injustice to the series and the creators. So for example, you have all of the AAPI books that came out. It was City, I think it was City Boy was one of
Yep.
them,
Spirit World and the Vigil.
Spirit World, and The Vigil. That was it. Those books came out. And I remember seeing some advertisement for them in
Light
DC
though.
books,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, okay, let's give them room to grow. Like maybe they'll do a bigger push towards when we get closer. Well, we get closer, nothing. It's the same amount.
And they've gone
Then
away
you,
completely.
yeah,
Yeah.
then you read the first issue and you're like, hey, that's awesome. Like these were good.
Yeah.
Let's keep these things going. Like, let's see where this goes. Well, then they do Night Terrors after the first issue of each of them. And now it's a 2-month long event. Not only have you halted all of DC because DC is not really putting anything out that isn't Night Terrors, you are taking the spotlight from a book that is meant to spotlight a specific group of people and tell their story and tell stories from those creators. Like, what kind of business model is that?
And they
If you
didn't give
want
them
to, if
tie-ins.
you,
They could have
yeah,
easily given the Angel Breaker got a tie-in before
yeah,
any of those characters. It's
even
crazy.
Punchline, like you think about it,
Yeah.
it's like Punchline got and Zatanna
And they didn't do
got,
anything with it. Nothing.
yeah,
Punchline, like
and
what did she do? Nothing. She ran from a Barbara cyborg.
yeah.
But
Well, I think
it's
the Zatanna one was good.
I
Like
like
I thought it
Zatanna,
was
the
really
Robot Man
good.
stuff too. Yeah, that was good. But
That was a really interesting dichotomy. I thought that was really well done. But it's
yeah,
like those characters are not A-listers that deserve a tie-in.
no.
But now these new books that work super well with your event that's going, you didn't give it a tie-in. It just doesn't do them justice. It's a bad
Yeah.
business decision. And they always want to talk about how they want to make comics more inclusive. And I think everybody should aim for that goal, to make
Sure.
comics more inclusive for every single person, except if you're a Nazi. I think I'm safe in saying that. You probably shouldn't have a platform if you're a Nazi.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
like, what do they do to actually include people? Like, what do they do to truly represent? And I think they unfortunately create a lot of throwaway characters, a lot of token characters that don't get any respect, that don't get developed, even though they could be very interesting because they're so worried about their bottom line, but their bottom line is flawed at the end of the day.
Yeah. And call it the cynical side of me. I've been a black guy reading comics for a while now, and I've paid close attention to these things. And I've noticed the thing where I feel like there is a concerted effort to get surface level praise for inclusion, but there is never that true investment. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you'll get the sprinkles of it. So like I think Miles was a surprising, it worked for them. Or, oh, Yara Flor, oh, you like the Brazilian Wonder Woman. Okay, cool. Well, we'll throw her a little bone. But I think they're like, okay, hey, we got this cool AAPI initiative. We're gonna do the whole thing. We're not gonna actually like invest in it, but we want the praise, right?
Yeah.
The headlines.
It's
Look at
yeah,
us.
it's
Look at us.
yeah.
We gave another woman a book. We have all these
Oh,
woman characters.
three
Yeah.
titles. We gave
Yeah.
AAPI month three titles to launch, and that's awesome. But it's lip service. It always
Yeah.
you're 100% right. It's lip service.
We have all these beautiful women characters. Look at our women characters. Well, no, the women are not going to write it. But they're women, right? Like
Yeah.
and it's that kind of surface level. Give us the praise, give us the headline. We look good, but it's never that, because diversity, inclusion is not cheap. It's not easy. I've always emphasized like these are not easy
Yeah.
things that you can just snap it and it exists. It's something that requires concerted effort and intention, and it's one of those tricky things where there's a passivity, I think, to the way they kind of treat it, and it can be very frustrating at times. I was so excited. I have a lot of Asian friends who were like stoked about seeing this like new characters. I mean, Xanthi from Spirit World, like she's sick. She has like this cool sword. Like there are so many. I could totally see her in Justice League Dark. Like I can see her in so many different applications, and nothing. Little
Yeah.
moments, and it's just a miss. And then they're like, "Oh, sorry, it didn't work. They didn't sell well, so I guess we're not going to use them going forward."
Yeah. I can
Yeah,
only imagine, like, you obviously have a very different experience with comics than I do. And I think that's important to note because
yeah,
like I've had the weird privilege of seeing every character that's cool, looks like me, sounds like me, dates the same people I do, right? And it really breaks my heart that there are a lot of people in this world who don't get that. They
yeah.
don't get to see a character who thinks, talks, sounds, looks, dates like them. And that's really sad to me that any business would go out of their way to just provide lip service and fail to back that up. That has always bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, I started reading comics around the same time as you did in your life, 8, 9 years old. And it wasn't until 2011 that I even, I'm Puerto Rican and Jamaican. So you could only imagine what Miles Morales looked like. Like, and again, it's almost it's the sad reality is, especially if you grow up as like, black or any person of color or queer in comics, you almost don't realize it sometimes until it happens, where it's like, oh man, yeah, I had never seen a superhero that looked like me. And then it
Mhm.
snapped. I'm like, whoa, like someone like I always thought it was, Captain America and Peter Parker. Like I love these characters, but like and we relate on, general life experience. But yeah, like we have different lives. When they look outside and when I look outside, we have kind of a different world that we kind of occupy. And
Mhm.
that was the first time I kind of looked at a comic and I was like blown away. Like I remember being so 2011, yeah, I was like 15, 16. And I remember walking into a comic shop and it was Ultimate Fallout #4. And at that time, nobody knew that was going to be an insanely expensive issue. And I had a
Yes.
copy of it and I bought it just because, they had this kid on the screen. I'm like, who is this kid with a spider mask? He looked like me. I had the bald head, the black kid.
Mhm.
And I'm like, who is this? And I buy this book and it's rough, man. Like where it's like there was
Mhm.
I didn't expect the investment. I've always been a cynical guy, so cynical
Yeah.
15-year-old here, where it's like, yeah, this is cute, but it's only gonna last like an issue anyways. Like I love Bendis, but I don't expect them to stick by this. And that
Yeah.
was, I think, a unique moment where like it worked economically, and so
Yeah.
he stuck around. And the unfortunate reality is that I feel like has been attempted again, but without the proper investment. That's the thing is
Yeah.
Bendis was like, this is who we're doing. This is
Mhm.
Spider-Man now. It took that white man in his privilege to be like, listen, like this is what we're
Who
doing.
has at least one adopted black child.
Exactly. Because so
I
he
think he has
understood.
multiple, but yeah.
Yes, too. And so he understood like, okay, I'm an accomplished writer, and this is only gonna work if I really light a fire under Marvel's ass. And like this, do I need to kill Peter? Okay, then
Yeah. Yeah.
here it is.
He did it
That's
without
what
a
it
second
took.
thought. Yeah.
That's what it
Yeah,
took.
100%. And I think it's really interesting because you say, you brought up uh I think you said Captain America and Peter Parker, and it's like
Yeah,
those guys look like me.
Yeah.
Like if I dyed my hair blonde, I look like Steve Rogers for the most part, right? I
Yeah.
even got blue eyes, right? Bruce Wayne looks like me. And I wanted to get your take on this actually.
Yeah.
Did you read I Am Batman?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I read it for the first time. Like I had collected it when it was coming out, and I just for whatever reason did not get around to reading it until relatively recently, maybe a month or two ago. And I remember reading it, and I thought it was really interesting when it first started because it looked like it was going to say something revolutionary. And then about halfway through, maybe a little before halfway through, it basically turns into enlightened centrism, which
Yeah.
is not what Batman is, and
No.
it certainly isn't what an African American Batman would be. So
Yeah.
I wanted to your take as a person of color. What did you think of I Am Batman versus what it could have been, like where it started and where it ended? Like, what was your take on it?
Yeah, and mine is not too dissimilar from what you observed, which was it ended up being kind of a half measure. Unfortunately, a missed opportunity. Like, I could sense what they were doing. It was actually very similar to, unfortunately, and not to as bad of an extent, but like what happened with me with Captain Falcon and Winter Soldier, where they dabbled on some heavy stuff, and I'm like, oh, and my ears perk up. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
you're doing it. You're not. All right. And I can't say I'm surprised. You know what I mean? Where it's like, because I think there's this real genuine concern of quote unquote pissing off the base. So you play the game like, well, and it's sad to say it sounds kind of messed up, but we'll throw you a bone. We'll throw you a little son. So you get the thing. There is a black Batman, and that's sick. And it's cool because it's a mantle, and mantles can be passed down. So in my view, I get excited because I'm like, oh, when there's a mantle, there's not all this stupid race swap conversation, which is exhausting to have to deal with constantly. Where it's like, oh, would it be, I'm sure you see all the same
I
conversations.
get it, dude. I get it, dude.
Yeah,
So my sister is in theater,
yeah,
and she's a musical theater major, and she graduated a couple years ago, and she said that a lot of people of color in her department they would get passed up constantly because it's like, okay, you're not white, and this character's white, and then
yeah,
finally there were directors that were involved with the department that said, no, we're gonna cast them anyway. Who cares? There's a suspension of disbelief that you are watching someone like that. This story is actually happening. You can absolutely race swap a character. And do you know the amount of old people that supported the college theater department that got so mad about
yeah,
that? Just the existence in a space. And it's like, does it matter? Is it core to that character's belief that they are a certain race? If not, why are you upset? Like, why are you
yeah.
mad about that? I get what you're saying, man.
Yeah,
100%.
and it also can be a little tough because it's almost like predictable now. Like it's like algorithmic. Like I can predict when it's going to happen. So like I remember when Moon Knight happened and they cast Oscar Isaac, and I remember jokingly saying to a friend of mine, I'm like, they ain't going to say a damn thing that a Latino got cast as a Jewish character. They're not going to say it because he's passable. He's close enough. He's light skinned enough.
Mm-hmm.
The paper bag test. But if
Yeah.
they did like a dark skinned Hispanic guy, same acting chops, oh my God, World War III. So yeah, as I was saying, there is this interesting thing where, and I have a buddy who's also Latino, and me and him always debate these things about like race swapping versus original characters. And I've realized, me as a Black comic book fan for years now, that weighs on you to the point where I'm like, give me the original character so I don't get shat on for a month, basically. Give me the
Yeah.
Duke. You know what I mean? Give me the Yara Floor. So I don't have to worry about all the inevitable complaints that when they take this character and make them brown, or God forbid they change their religion or something like that. And so yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to like
Yeah.
have someone who looks like me and pop up on a panel, and I get
Yeah.
excited, and they tell me that my experience is woke bullshit. Like
Yeah.
that's trippy
Well,
stuff, you know?
it didn't even occur. And this just shows where I'm at in society, and my experience is that I never even realized, like it just occurred to me that you almost as an individual would get shat on for a month in every
Yeah.
tweet about the thing. It's
Just
not
because of what
just
they did,
it's
not what
not
I did.
yeah, and it's not even like news breaks,
Yeah.
right? And it's not like that day you have to hear stuff. You constantly have to hear stuff, and
Yeah.
it's not directed at Jabril, right? But it's
I'm the
it's
conduit.
directed at, yeah, you're the conduit for it. It's at people who look, sound and believe things you do, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now you're by proxy the issue. It never even occurred to me. And that
Yeah.
shows
Yeah.
how messed up that is, that I couldn't even think of that.
And that's what I always try to explain to people, where it's like when they talk about like privilege, it's not this idea that like your life is sunshine and rainbows and mine is hell on earth. It's the small things where like when they do something to Daredevil, they don't run to you to be the representative of all that they hate about comics. But when something happens in my direction, suddenly, as a person who I, like everybody else, just consume comics, I'm not sitting there. I'm not David Zaslav making decisions on behalf of DC.
Right.
I'm just sitting there like everybody else. And like, yeah, I get it rough. God forbid I had a decent review of like Miss Marvel, the mutant book that they just put out. And I was like, I thought it was fun. And people are like, oh yeah, you would. I bet
Yeah.
you would. And I'm like, damn, is it still
But like,
like
what's
that?
that supposed to mean? Like, what's that supposed? I bet you would. What do you mean by that? Say the quiet part out
Yeah.
loud at that point, because
And it's like they
that's
see
just a
brown
straight up
guy,
dog whistle.
Arabic name. Sure.
Yeah,
You're the
no,
problem.
that's ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
Man,
Not to make it all about me, but
no, I mean, no, but that's the reality of comics,
yeah.
is that it's not all about anybody. It's about
Yeah,
all of
exactly.
us. And
Exactly.
honestly, like, as a person who, one, absolutely praises inclusivity in comics and wants that and strives for that, and not just inclusivity, but like actual representation, not
Mhm.
tokenism, right? Wants to support however I can. Hearing these conversations, like, I'm in the same fight you are, but I'm
Yeah.
in the you're the front line and I'm the one who's supporting you,
Yep.
because I don't know. People are only going to listen to who they want to listen to, and if I'm saying the same thing you're listening to, or if I'm saying the same thing you're saying, they're bound to listen at some point. So we might
Yeah.
as well be a united front. It's funny that you
Exactly.
also said that like you thought it was fun and like you didn't have a negative review. TS from Can't Be Killed Comics and I had a conversation about this the other day, where we are so easy to please as comic book fans
Tell me
that
about
like
it.
you just throw something at us and 9 times out of 10 we're gonna like it, and I'm like, hey, that's really rad. And if I don't like it, I'm okay. It wasn't a waste of my time. It shaped my taste, right? I understand better now what I didn't like. And I think that's such a stupid argument that like, oh, you would like that, huh? It's like,
Yeah.
well, dude, actually, I like 90% of the things I read, I
I
actually
like more than I
enjoy.
dislike for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I could be a hater. I'm more of a hater about movies than I am
Yeah.
comic books.
That's me in
Um,
music. I'm definitely a
I'm
hater.
also
Yeah.
I'm also a hater of music. Don't get me started. We'll
We'll
talk
talk
about
about
that
it.
later
We'll
too.
get there.
But like with movies, I'm like, dude, you would like grown-ups. Like
Grown
you're the
ups.
type of person,
Yeah.
who'd like grown-ups, right? You're the type of person who just only watches studio comedies. You've never seen Satan Tango, right? Like you've never seen Citizen Kane. Um, but like as a comic book fan, I'm like, oh, you have a treat in store for you. Oh, you're going to love it. And I turn into everybody's fun aunt who just wants everybody to have fun. As soon as someone's like, hey, recommend me a comic, I'm like, oh, do you want 10?
You
Like,
want
and then
10 yeah.
then the guy, my friend, like Charlie at the LCS, is like, actually, that book sucks. And I'm like, hey man, to you, not to me. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think life is easier when you look for things to love instead of
Yes.
I feel like in yeah, I've had debates with people about this too, where like, I wasn't always I'm relatively new to comics discourse. I've consumed the medium
Oh
for
yeah, yeah.
but like in terms of consuming other people's content about it and like hearing people's takes and stuff, that's within the last 2 years. And I've noticed that, I bring it up to my buddies where I'm like, it seems like people is default. Like you're like guilty until proven innocent. Like I hate your book
Mhm.
until you prove to me why it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
And
Why is it worth my time?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that
and
I
to
hear
some
that all the
people,
time.
it's not worth their time until it fits this very specific niche of what they're looking for. Like I read Alan Moore's Swamp Thing when I was a kid, and I want nothing but that. And again,
Yeah.
I love those books too, but I think it helps for me. It's like I try to go in neutral, or if I know I like the characters, or if I know I like this writer, I'll assume this will be a good time. It might not
Yeah.
be gospel. It might not be something I
Yeah.
revisit, but
Yeah.
my expectation is like it'll probably be a fun. And if it's
Well, but
trash, it happens.
not
But
people romanticize the 90s like there
yeah,
wasn't trash, not necessarily in comics, but just in media in general. There's more trash in the 90s than there are in the 2000s.
They
Like
just forget about it.
yeah, it gets forgotten. Like
Yeah.
not every comic book series you read is going to be a tentpole. And I hate to say it because we have mutuals and we have friends who love Dark Knights of Steel. Dark Knights of Steel is not going to get remembered in 10 years. Nobody's going to
Statistically,
look
it
at it
can't. Yeah, no.
statistically. Dude, if people don't remember Convergence, they're not going to remember Dark
Oh,
Knights
yeah.
of Steel. Okay. That's just the reality where we're at. And I think people think everything needs to be a tentpole. They think it needs to be the best ever, or you can't enjoy it. And it's like,
Yeah,
dude, I'm enjoying it now, and that's what matters now. And every once
exactly.
in a while, you'll come across something that is that good, like Mr. Miracle. I talk
Oh,
about
Tom
Mr.
King's.
Miracle. Yeah, I wax poetic about Tom King's
Love it.
Mr. Miracle all day, every day. Right, saved my life, made me want to be a better man when I read it the first time. Right, that's a book I'm going to show my kids and go, hey, I read this when I was in my early 20s and it stopped me from killing myself and it made me a better
Yeah,
father before I even had kids. And that's
yeah.
what's going to happen. And they're going to love it too, because that's what tentpole stuff does. Am I going to hand my kids King in Black and go, I read this when I was in my early 20s and I really enjoyed it then? They're going to read it and go, hey, this is average. This is mediocre. Like, why did you show me this? And maybe they love it. Hey, that's great. If they love what they love, great. But like, not every event is going to be a tentpole event. Like, no one's going to remember Axe Judgment Day in 5 years. No one's going to care. They'll remember. I will say they will remember most of this Krakoa era of
Oh, yeah.
events. Like
The
these are
Quiet
big
Council,
events.
that's going down for sure. But
This is arguably the high point of X-Men canon in terms of what's being canonized and will
yeah.
be setting the tone for the future.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is even amongst some of the arguably like some of the best comics or comic eras, like I think it's undeniable. Krakoa is one of the best, if not the best, X-Men eras of all time. I think that's
Yeah,
undeniable at this point.
yeah, I would say so.
Fallen Angels, people forget that it happened. Like they're even
Mhm.
within Krakoa, there are series that came and went. Have you
Mhm.
read X Factor by Leah Williams recently? No,
No.
it's not bad.
Did you
It's
read
just
X Corp even?
yeah,
Like X Corp
it's
tied
forgettable.
directly into X-Men and people
Yeah,
did not read X Corp.
it's like it directly ties into like Ten of Swords. Like there are major implications in that series, and it goes forgotten. Or like a personal favorite of mine, no one talks about Victor Laval's Sabretooth. No one cares.
Dude, I loved it. I thought it was
I loved
awesome.
it too. I
I
thought it
also
was sick.
loved
Yeah,
Sabretooth and the Exiles. That
me
was awesome
too.
too.
And he's building to
Amazing.
a third of his event, and like
Yeah. Oh, I
yeah,
can't
like
wait.
and even things that you and I agree are like awesome get forgotten. So like
Yeah.
statistically, not everything is going to reinvent the wheel, be this
Yeah.
insane event, but
Well, when I went to film school, we talked about this a lot. In some of my intro classes, was everybody likes to romanticize the 40s and 50s for film or the silent film era. They love to romanticize that era as like every movie being made was mint. It was ace. It was perfect, right? Most of those movies don't even exist anymore because nobody cared enough to preserve them.
yeah,
Like there's just as many stickers in every single era of film, movies, film and movies, the same thing. Film, TV, music, video games,
yeah,
comics, it's all the same. There's just as many stinkers as there are winners. In fact, there's more stinkers than winners in all of them.
yeah. I think just and in terms of just the way time works and the way writers work, where it's like the farther back you go, the probably real there's always kind of like a climax on trash. And I think comics, and this might be a hot take, I came up on this. So like this is not me speaking mean. Like the 90s is the climax of trash. But no one
Yeah.
remembers the trash series because they're trash. But go to your LCS's dollar bin and categorize it by year. A bulk of it is going to be random 90s stuff from
Yep.
characters that they tried to make a thing that didn't,
All
that
right.
were
So
half
think about
naked.
this,
And yeah,
right? You love X-Men. You love
yeah,
X-Men. I love X-Men.
yes.
What's Longshot doing these days? One of the most
Your
popular
guess,
X-Men in the 90s, right?
your
What's
guess is as
what's
good as mine.
Warren Worthington the third doing right now? Right? What's
So,
Angel doing right now?
something in Dark
Like
X-Men. Something.
it's like these characters were
Yeah.
so popular in the 90s and they
Yep.
got thrown away. So you know what Longshot 1 is probably going for? Like maybe at best a 9.6, like $4, $5. Like there's no way that these characters who were super popular in the 90s are even remembered
I
today,
got you
let
one
alone
bigger.
their series, you know?
Where's Jubilee? Tell me
She's
where's Jubilee?
on the X-Men.
She's doing something with the exterminators. She's like
No, but
whatever
she's
they
now no. But did you read issue 25? that I made
Yes,
a
I did.
TikTok about today?
Yes, I
She's
did.
on the X-Men, dude.
Yeah. Yes, yes and no. Yes and no.
Like
But
she got voted on the team.
temporarily, sure. Yeah.
Not to be too spoilery, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure we're transitioning into talking about
Yeah.
X-Men.
Let's do
So
some X-Men talk.
we will. This is spoiler. I'm gonna. Can I do a notice to all your viewers?
Yeah, listen, Jarrell Talks Comics. We're a spoiler channel. I do a poll list review. So this is not the place to go if you
Okay.
haven't caught up. So
This is. Let me look directly at the camera. This is going to be the most spoilery that we can talk about X-Men right now. Like it's no joke.
as deep as you could imagine.
Like if you care about the most minute spoilers, like click off, come back after you've read it. I promise you it'll be worth it.
Read it
in fact, and read it all. Read everything that we talk about. What I will say is I'll be specific about where I'm talking about.
Yep.
So you can go back and watch that or read that thing and actually be able to understand what I'm talking about. Address to them done. Now it's just you and me.
All right. Okay. Let's go. Let's get crazy. So as we're pivoting, Krakoa era. Okay. You're mostly caught up.
One or two books not caught up.
Yeah. Okay. So you saw what went down at the Hellfire Gala.
I did.
It was something that we knew was building for quite a while. We knew that Jerry Duggan was going to take control and do the Fall of X thing. One thing I want to say as just a general, and I've emphasized this multiple times on the show, which is like I had a big apology to give to Jerry Duggan because when
as you should.
Yeah, because again, I totally respected him as a writer, but like I can't tell you how many times I was like, he's fine, middling guy, he's fine. And I was like, taking over for Hickman, sure, buddy. And I was like, okay, he's doing some Orca stuff, okay. And I had to shut my mouth very quickly, pretty recently, where I'm like, okay, Jerry, he took over Iron Man. I was like, Iron Man,
it rules too.
He got me.
It's a good book.
He's killing it right now. Like, okay, Jerry, I didn't expect that because we just came off a Sins of Sinister where like Kieran
not
Gillen,
a huge fan. I will say, not a huge fan of Sins of Sinister.
Very weird.
I think it's one of the weakest out of the, and weirdly enough, as much as I do enjoy and respect House of X, Powers of X, I think Sins of Sinister, Judgment Day, and House of X, Powers of X are weirdly enough the weakest three of the events, but House of X, Powers of X being exponentially higher than
of course.
But like that just also goes to show how crazy good the events during the Krakoa era have been.
I've been very impressed.
If House of X or Powers of X is bottom three, you're doing very well for yourself.
I mean, they straight up did another event named after another event that didn't have anything to do with the original Inferno. Nothing to do with the original.
Oh, it was amazing too.
And it was sick. And I was like, this is crazy.
Seeing Doug stand up to Mystique and Destiny.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're not going to kill Moira. You're not going to do it. Doug, you probably should have, buddy. Hate to break it to you. You probably should have let them.
Yo, Doug is such an underrated. I love Doug.
Dude, I hope he's okay. Honestly.
That was some trippy stuff when he got swallowed up suddenly. That gave me chills. I won't lie. When I read that and Krakoa's only response,
my stomach dropped. My stomach dropped to my testicles, dude. I swear to God. Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, you guys are fucked. Like, if that's Krakoa's response to all this is like, oh no, you guys don't stand a chance. And so when I saw I just saw the X-Men vaporized just like that, just a cannonball. Oh, it was actually strangely reminiscent of Juggernaut in Sins of Sinister being projectiled through the universe for, I don't know, 1,000 years.
And however long this rail gun of a man.
that was hilarious. That's the one thing I think I like about Sins of Sinister is how ridiculous it is. It is the most concentrated of like, hey, Kieran Gillen, every weird thought you've had about X-Men, here's your chance to do it. No ramifications.
What's awesome is that Sinister is also this like super flamboyant, I guess not explicitly queer, but queer-coded character who's just very much himself. And he's so funny. Like that's one of the beauties of Mr. Sinister. As much as by the ends of Sins of Sinister, I couldn't stand him, obviously, just because of what he set in motion more than anything. He is so funny, and he is such a good character when it comes to just being fun and doing all these ridiculous things. And I can only imagine that. So when I think about it, when Juggernaut's just hurtling through space, I just imagine him kind of looking like Adam Warlock did in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Just like flying.
Like that's so funny, dude.
And I just love how like anybody who knows Juggernaut knows that his power set is essentially just momentum, I guess.
Yeah.
And so him flying, he has no means to stop himself. And enough time
None.
has elapsed that he's essentially, whether he's not even sentient on the other side is I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But
I don't know.
what I loved about Sins of Sinister, and again, I didn't love the event. I was actually very disappointed by it. But
I was too.
what I did love about it was to see that, okay, Sinister, you got your way and it's ass. And just seeing that revelation on his face of like, shit.
Oh, I messed up.
I need you to clean up my mess. Like I got my way 100%. What I've been trying to do since the 90s. Here we go. I took over everything. And that first issue, I was like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing. And by the end, I was like, okay, kind of eye roll. But that was that funny moment where he was just like, I need you guys to clean my mess bad.
He also, but he played himself because one of the other Sinisters in a different universe
ascended
got the Dominion first.
Yeah.
Did the same plot, but actually won. So it's doubly humiliating that not only does he have to go to the people that he's been actively like working against this entire time, but he has to admit that like he beat himself and he's not the superior Sinister.
Yeah. And I don't think people who are like following along with X-Men truly understand the implications of the fact that a Sinister hit Dominion first, where it's like when you hit Dominion status, you are existing outside of time space. So as of the moment that Dominion ascended and became a Dominion, it has always existed. So the implications of that Dominion and whatever it chooses to do could reverberate, period, through X-Men history. Like that's an insane revelation.
Well, to think about it, like the Maker doesn't even have that much power. Exactly. And I would argue before Sins of Sinister, I would have argued that Maker bodies Sinister 10 times out of 10.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That's what I would have
without an issue
said. But yeah, I think it's one of the things you try not to think about too much because
it's trippy stuff.
Like you try not to think about your death too much and like what's afterward because it scares you. That's a thing I wouldn't want to think about too much is the fact that Sinister has its own Dominion now.
Yeah, it's just like the point that and then you got to thank Hickman for all this trippy, ridiculous stuff that he does, where it's like when you just ascend to the point where ascendancy is not even a concept anymore. Like that's where the Technarchs are looking at you as God. Like where the gods look at you as God is like a trippy concept to think where it's just like when again it is true godhood outside of the normal. They throw godhood around a lot where it's like he's like gods, the Eternals, gods, whatever, Thor, God. But like when you hit the point where you've ascended to a point where you've always existed, so you have existed past your own conception. Before those who conceived you were conceived. Like that's some trippy shit. And so I'm hoping also someone does something with that.
We're seeing it in Immortal Thor.
Yeah.
Did you read Immortal Thor?
Yes, I did. Yes.
So like we're seeing that the gods, the ones that they've been advertising on the front of basically every Marvel book for
who's the gods,
2 months, is like those guys. Like Thor can't beat the weakest one, it seems like. And I'm excited to see what Ewing does with that. Not to get too sidetracked, but you're 100% right that at some point it's just brutal. Like how are you going to stop this? And what makes it really interesting is that at the end of the Hellfire Gala, Cyclops brings up that like one Stark Sentinel was enough to basically annihilate the X-Men. What happens if there's 3? What happens if there's 4? And there's also that principle of horses drawing a carriage. One can can pull so much. And then you'd think 2 can only just do double that, but it actually does exponentially more.
Yeah.
Because there's some psychological intangible thing that forces them and they actually work harder together. I have a feeling like the Stark Sentinels are that way. Is like you got beat by 1. You got mollywopped by 1. Yep. How are you going to face 3? How are you going to face a legion of them? Like, what are you going to do? And then Nimrod's even more powerful than those. Like, what do I'm excited to see how they do it.
This is just the machines working in conjunction with Orcus, which is why, like, if anybody who's read through Hoxpox onwards, you'll understand, like, the mutants have never encountered this level of resistance before, where it's like, we haven't even spoken, you and I, about the post-humans. The fact that the vault is open.
Yeah.
And the mutants have zero way to it. Okay, I know Bishop and Cable are trying to do something. They don't.
They're trying to stop the psyop, basically, or biological.
The best thing they can do is, can we put them back in a trance? Not beat them, not send them back in the vault. Can we try to get control of their minds again? Like the mutant, that's what I love about this era, which is like, you want to talk about insurmountable odds. Once upon a time, I remember there was a little Sentinel, Days of Future Past, like that was an issue. Or, what is Onslaught gonna do? How about like
What's
there's
Apocalypse gonna do?
yeah,
How can we
exactly.
possibly beat Apocalypse? Are you kidding me? He's in Sabanur, dude.
And
He's gonna kill us.
now we have a Dominion.
Yeah,
What do you do with that as Charles Xavier? So when he's sitting there defeated on the beach, I'm with you. So am I. I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know how you fix this.
yeah,
This is messed up stuff. And mind
yeah.
you,
It is.
we know that they have yet to explore. Like,
They don't even know
yeah,
how boned they are.
Mother
And
Righteous just reintroduced herself. God knows what she's gonna do when she
captured
really.
captured the Atlantic island of Krakoa.
Yes,
So not even just Pacific Krakoa, like Atlantic Krakoa. So they're gone.
and she's
And
essentially still charging up too, mind you. Like, though that little
yeah,
thank you, Mother
uh-huh,
Righteous stuff, she's still kind of building her rapport with
yeah.
people. She
Because she
hasn't
also,
actually utilized her power yet.
yeah, she's also like, if I recall correctly, she's kind of like Exodus in that belief makes her more powerful because
That's
it's like
exactly from
that's
my
her
understanding. Yeah.
magic. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So like the amount of people that owe her now,
Yeah.
like, oh, and we saw in
Even Storm in the whole Araco
yeah,
thing, she's
yeah,
in control of, and
yeah.
they don't know that.
Because Genesis comes back and she's controlling everybody, and she's
Exactly.
even controlling Storm, and now they have to run,
And she
quote
controls
unquote,
Orcus
right?
too. If you've read the tie-in with Doctor Stasis and everything,
Yep.
she controls Stasis. She controls Orcus. She controls the
Well,
mute.
but she doesn't really control stasis.
Well,
In the end of the Sinister Four, you reveal that Orbis Stellaris and Miss
that
and
is true.
Doctor
They are
Stasis
working
are
conjunction.
talking, and he's like, Stasis says, and I'm almost quoting directly, uh, I told her that I do everything for her, and I wasn't lying, but she doesn't understand that I don't do everything she tells me to.
Exactly. I guess the tricky thing is we haven't seen what Thank You, Mother Righteous looks like when properly
Yeah,
utilized. So when she decides to flip that switch, whatever that looks like, we don't know what that looks like. So it's one of those tricky things where I think it's easy to be like, okay, he's got his plans. Orbis Stellaris floating in space somewhere. They're working together, doing something. Whether that is enough to counteract whatever she's building there. Obviously, she's building some degree of control, or it's actually very sinister, like in terms of how he
well,
kind of hijacked resurrection protocols.
She's Rebecca Essex. Like
Yeah, she's
she's just as sinister as he is.
exactly. She's hijacking something. We just
Mm-hmm.
don't know what that looks like. So that's why I am hesitant to simply dismiss her sway over certain beings, because I'm like, she hasn't activated it yet. And look what's happened. She hasn't even
Yeah,
touched it yet. And look what's
yeah.
happened. It's
Yeah,
tricky.
I also think is Stasis are Stasis and Stellaris going to get in their own way?
They're
are
both
they gonna
sinisters. So
are
yes,
they gonna
to
be
answer your
yeah,
question.
are they gonna be too prideful to understand when they're beat? But then you also look at it and go, well, Mother Righteous is also a sinister, and so she has
Yeah.
the same pride. Is she going to be too prideful? And that's what I think that is interesting about the Sinister Four. Like I said, after the Sins of Sinister, I stopped caring about Sinister. I just didn't care as much. It was just Sinister overload. It's kind of one of
Yeah.
those things with like what was it, Absolute Carnage a couple years ago.
All
uh
carnaged out. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and like I don't care. Same with King in Black. Like okay, now I'm at the point where like I do not care. Same with the Axe Judgment Day. I do not care about the Eternals. Like I'm
Same.
past
I'm
caring.
off it. Yeah.
Like one, I never cared because I just don't like them. But two, like why why are we still harping on this, right? And so I was initially really hesitant. I went into the Sinister Four, and I will say I was very pleasantly surprised with
Yeah.
what I read. And let me see, I have it right here. It's yeah, it's Gillen, right? Gillen's still writing it. So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see where he goes from there, with Sinister and everything, but I don't know, man.
It's tricky to do anything
It's
else with
tricky.
Sinister when Sins of Sinister, almost by definition, is taking Sinister to the furthest extent one could with that writer. Like, what else is there to do with him?
But it didn't focus on Orbis Stellaris, it didn't focus on Stasis, and it didn't
Yeah,
focus on
it,
Mother
it, it
Righteous.
it
And if
focused
it's
on
not focusing
Nathaniel.
on,
Yeah.
yeah, it focused on Diamond, not
Yeah.
Spade, Club, or Heart.
And there are
So
personality differences. So you're right. It
yeah,
could
and so
manifest very differently.
now you have ultimately three different characters. Even though they're branched from the same one, yeah, it's very interesting. Um, Yeah, I'm excited to keep reading it. I really
Yeah.
am. And I think that the stakes, I was gonna say this earlier, actually. So if you're watching this days after I've recorded this, I made a TikTok day of recording before we did this conversation where I talked about issue 25 of
I
Dugan's
saw that.
X-Men
Yes.
is my favorite. You liked it. That's how I know you saw
Uh,
it. is I think the single greatest issue of X-Men that has been written in at least a decade. And I would not be surprised. Like I really truly would put it up against almost anything from Extinction Agenda 90 onward to now.
okay.
Like I
Yeah.
really would put it as a single issue, not necessarily as the wider event or whatever. I wouldn't necessarily put it up against like Dark Phoenix Saga. You know, that's a big deal. But I truly, truly believe it's one of the best Marvel books ever. One, and two, one of the best X-Men books of all time. But the stakes have never been higher. I didn't say that in the video because I wanted to save it for this. Like the
Yeah.
stakes have never been higher. M Day was huge, right? All these millions and billions of mutants that just disappeared and were just obliterated into ether. Like that's a huge deal. Hey, guess what? It's even worse now. Like
Oh yeah.
it is as bad as Genosha. It's as bad as Extinction Agenda, if not it's worse than Extinction Agenda for
Yeah.
sure. Worse than Boulevard Trask and Days of Future Past. Like it is yeah, it's the stakes have never been higher, and I think I'm really loving that because I think when I read Immortal 13, I think it's 13, it's either 12 or 13, where Doug gets swallowed up by Krakoa.
Oh yeah.
Um, my heart sank, dude.
That's
Like
a
my
scary scene,
stomach
man.
dropped, and
Yeah.
you said like you got chills reading it. Like I felt dread while reading it, going, where do they go?
Oh
What do they
no.
do? How could they possibly get out of this? Right? Then you keep reading, and then you get to X-Men 25, and you see the aftermath of everything that happened at the Hellfire Gala and where they're at now, and it is astronomically worse. Like
Yeah.
it made me want to cry because you see formerly Kitty Pryde, formerly Kate Pryde, now Shadowcat. You
Yeah.
see what she went through as she phased through the gate, which is weird, obviously, because she did not before. And if you're watching this part of the podcast, I assume you are almost caught up and don't care about spoilers. Before she could not phase through gates.
Yeah.
Krakoa would not let
If
her.
you want context
Now
on
she
that, read
can.
Marauders so you can see her
Yeah,
banging her
yeah,
face
absolutely.
against yeah.
Yeah, having a broken nose for
Yeah.
30 issues. Yeah, 100%. So now seeing her be able to phase, and now she's the special one again, was interesting. So reading 25, her conversation with the older woman, who I don't know who that older woman was. Do you know?
No, I
She's
assumed
obviously
it was a
some
family
mentor
member or
or
something
family.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And she talks about like, and what's really interesting, and I noticed this the other day, um, again because I noticed it months before, but I noticed it again the other day when I was reading through X-Men. It's really cool to see Kitty wearing her Star of David again.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was established as being Jewish very early on, and I don't think they really ever did anything with it for a long time.
Not
And then
recently, no.
throughout all of Krakoa, her outfit one has been dressed like a pirate, and I gotta say, it's really doing something for me. I
I
really
love
enjoy
the
that
pirate
pirate
outfit.
outfit. I
I'm
really love
glad you
it.
like
Really
it
love her
too.
sword.
Yeah.
Really love her sword. But she's always had a gold Star of David around.
Yep.
And Peter and Ben, Peter Parker and Benjamin Grimm are canonically Jewish, and
Yeah.
so is Kitty Pryde, and she never has really been shown being Jewish. So saying the Star of David, but then she talks about like my rabbi said this,
Yeah.
and then the old days like, do you still believe in God? Like after
Yeah.
all of this that you've been through, do you still believe in God? And she's like, well, of course. And it's like really interesting.
Yeah.
And Chip Zdarsky touched on the same kind of topic in Daredevil number 14, which was his last issue on Daredevil. Rest in peace. Made a video about it. Go watch it. The video. It's heartbreaking that it's over. But he did a very similar thing with the themes of how do these characters who have encountered all this supernatural, all these superpowered beings, how do they rectify that there's still a Christian God?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
the God of David, right? Like the monotheistic Judeo-Christian God. How do you rectify that? And Matt does it in an interesting way that who cares? I believe what I believe.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going with that. And when I read, I'll call her Kate because she was Kate at this point. When I read Kate saying this to her confidant, we'll call her confidant.
Yeah.
Of course I do. Of course I still believe in God. It felt almost defensive. It felt reflexive. It felt like she was saying, how dare you question my faith in God? And like almost like she was too ashamed, like maybe she doesn't. And I think that that's really interesting take from Dugan and Zdarsky, is that Zdarsky's was very much who cares, I believe what I believe. Whereas Dugan's take, as he wrote Kate, was very, well, I probably not, but I'm going to say I do, and still seeking, still searching, still finding. And personally, like I do believe in God, but I also have had those moments in my life where people have asked, like, hey, do you still believe? Like specifically like family members who are firm believers. My parents, for example, are firm believers. And they will ask me like, hey, do you still believe in God? Less so now, like at different points in my life. Right. And I would always go, yeah, of course. But then half the time I'm like, I don't know. Like I've been in that exact same situation. I would say I'm in Matt's position now where I go, who cares?
Yeah.
I believe what I believe. Right. And that's it. And I am going to continue with my beliefs. Right. And then I've been at Kate's position at different times in the past where I've gone, of course I do. Why wouldn't I? How dare you ask me that? But like, you're still searching. You have no clue. You have no idea whether you believe in God or not at times. And I think that that's a really interesting juxtaposition. And seeing that through line, I mean, these books are not connected whatsoever. Like the events of Daredevil have nothing to do with X-Men and vice versa. But to see two writers at Marvel who are similar age ranges, I think Dugan might be a little older than Zdarsky.
A little bit, yeah.
But like seeing those two people who I would say presumably grew up similarly. I think that's a little bit of an assumption. That's probably just pure speculation. But like in my mind, that makes sense. I don't know why. But like to see them each have different reactions to that is very, very interesting to me. And we don't see a lot of through lines thematically through Marvel very often, especially outside of an event. Like those aren't affiliated with an event. Like you see a lot of during Devil's Reign, you see a lot of the same themes from Moon Knight to Daredevil's like Devil's Reign run.
A lot of synergy there, yeah.
Yeah, they're tie-ins and stuff, but this is like unrelated. And so I think it's really, really interesting. And I think that the stakes being so high also make it like you better pray to your higher power because who knows how we're going to get out of this, right?
Yeah. So that letter also resonated with me. And that's why this is so interesting to me, because I feel like perspective plays such a major role into how you interpret that. So like the really quick background, not to get lost in the woods here, but I grew up deep religious family, and to the point where I was studying to be in the ministry for many years, up until I was about middle high school. And I'm no longer religious, but I have that foundation. And so I went through every phase you could imagine.
Yeah,
basically through the belief
very
system.
Similar phase. I guarantee very similar phases to what I've been
through. And you know, though you and I may have like landed in different places, but the interesting thing is where you saw a reflex, almost like a defensiveness, I also picked up on that. I also saw like a moment of maybe trying to convince herself, because and I kept going back to this idea of like faith, not only faith in your God, but faith in the institution that you just watched collapse. Because I just reread Hoxpox not long ago. There was this level of faith, especially what Kurt was pushing at that time, that even he's lapsed on and kind of left behind, where it's like, we've built this almost indestructible thing. We have Orcus on their heels. They can't touch us. We are no longer what we were before then. And her, with her Jewish background, there's this vulnerability I think she's always felt, obviously in her faith, and then her being a mutant and targeted. And finally, we are in a position of strength. And to see them fall back, not to where they were, but even worse than where they were.
Yeah.
There's almost a moment where she has to grapple with the fact that, like, what do I place my faith in anymore? So I saw a thing where she's like, that's all I got, almost. Like whatever I yes, I can look out the world, and she's doing her little Kate Pride Ronin thing right now,
Yeah.
where it's like my faith is all I got, and like Krakoa is gone, and so like looking towards what bit of maybe internal or spiritual safety, that safety net, that what I came up in, maybe to so many people, faith is like a source of comfort for her. I feel
Yep.
like that's what she's trying to convince, because like I can't give that up. So like I
Yep.
was forced to give up on the Krakoa idea. I was forced to give up on being part of the X-Men and all these different things that have completely evaporated overnight, and the power center and the quiet council and the mass amount of wealth and resources and pharmaceuticals that were coming out of Krakoa. They were
Mhm.
saving the world, and that's gone like that. All I got is my faith in my God. And doing a thought experiment of whether I believe or not is not practical right now, because I need this. So stop asking me. And so I
Yeah.
got that same defensiveness that I think you also picked up with, which is why I think it's so interesting to understand that kind of faith-based component to the
Mhm.
story. And whether that was intentional on the writer's part or not, you and I could speculate. But
Yeah.
almost that's not
Without
even
asking
important.
Jerry Dugan, we're not gonna figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's almost not even important, because like it's so much of that is open. That's the beauty, I think, of like good writing and good comics, is it's
Mhm.
open to interpretation based on your life
Yeah.
experience. So you
Well,
and I
I
could
also
take away
think it's
things. Yeah.
I also think that there's an interesting connection between her and Magneto in this moment, because
Oh
Magneto is
yeah.
canonically
Yeah.
a Holocaust survivor, right?
Yeah.
And so for him, mutantum is also equivalent to him being Jewish.
Yeah.
And for the fact that he was hunted down, beaten, vilified because of something he could not control, he was born into, whether it be his mutantum or him being Jewish. Kate is now dealing with the same thing.
Exactly.
And I think that that resonates too, because even in today, like, yes, we are not going through the same Holocaust that Jews in Europe went through in the 1940s, right? Like, we're not going through that,
Yeah.
but there's still anti-Semitism in this world.
Oh
There's
yeah.
still the
Absolutely.
hate towards Jewish people for no reason, obviously. Like, and she not only has to deal with that, and it could be an analogy of that, but it's also like she is a mutant. And so now her and Magneto have way more common ground than they did before.
But yeah, no, I think yeah, it's an interesting thing to see that level, and that's why especially when you kind of go back to that initial Krakoa era, there it, and I keep going back to the specific scene where you see it's a classic visual where you have Charles Xavier, Magneto, and Apocalypse sitting in these meetings, and there's always, I think, this sense of forwardness that Magneto speaks with, that is often interpreted by the people he's speaking to and sometimes readers as this mutant supremacy thing. And sure, I think it's undeniable that he sees the Homo superior as the superior hominid, but there's also a contingent of like, I'm not gonna be your punching bag,
Mhm.
despite the position that I play. So I see the same thing in Kate as you were talking about, where it's like, okay, you gonna kick us down? Cool. I'm not just gonna sit here. I'm gonna slaughter who I need to slaughter, because I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep fighting. She does not stop, and that is so Magneto like, to like where everything has fallen. Charles has given up. He's sitting on the beach there. The mutants have been transported to nowhere, no when, and you got Exodus
Yeah.
doing his whole Moses allegory, which is a whole different
Oh,
subject.
that's amazing. I love that we only got like 4 panels of that, but I'm
Yeah,
stoked. I'm stoked to dive into that. That's going to be amazing.
yeah, and it's just and all this has happened, and you have lots of resistance, but specifically her, that one woman army type of thing, that there's not a moment's rest. I'm going into the Orca space and I'm going to talk to Firestar and I'm going to find
Yeah.
out what's going on. And Emma, who, oh, this is yours. Okay. I won't kill her right now in front of you. So like,
Yeah.
I love that. Like no matter what, it's again, it's the faith in who I am and in my vision and in my mission, and that I'm not going to stop. That again
Yeah.
makes her so much more like Magneto than even Charles in this example, which you can have issues with the characterization of Charles. He's gone through quite a bit. I can understand why he reacts that way. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
talked with you about House of X, Powers of X, and
yeah,
we'll be posting that content soon, within the next week or two. But
okay,
um I brought up that it's like Charles is now like too prideful Like
Oh
he
yeah,
was like you saw the change in Hoxpox where Magneto is now the pragmatic one, and Charles is the one who he's thinking he's superior to everybody. He trusts too much in his own
yeah.
influence, his own leadership, and we're seeing that taken away. And if anything, we see it in Magneto even after death. The fact that the death of Polaris is reacting to his death as hard as she is
I love that
before the
scene too.
Hellfire Gala, right? She's mourning him, a man who ultimately wasn't even really that good of a father to her.
Not at
But
all. Yeah,
she saw
yeah,
his influence, she saw how he was the father of a nation.
yeah,
And like that to me speaks volumes. But I also so like Reddit is not almost ever right about anything. But
yeah.
every once in a while you get a comment or you get a
They
post and
catch a moment. Yeah,
you're like, yeah. It's like that Onion article where it's like the worst person you know just said something you agree with.
yeah,
And
literally.
it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
crap. Like, yeah, I do agree with that. Someone brought up that like Kate has not had any real moments in a while and that she's
yeah,
been forgotten. And I think it's really, really cool to see her be the star, and not only be the star, but she's been so ineffectual for the majority of the Krakoa run that now she's the hope. She is the one who is going to bring justice. She's the one who's going to help them fight back and have this resistance. And I think it's amazing. Like, I think it's so, so cool to see. But you also get one, she has her Magneto influence, like we just talked about, but she's also remembering her past teachers. You've got Ogun, who she goes back and sees his letter to her, and she's like, "Well, I'm Shadowcat now. If I killed
yeah,
Ogun, like I'm a killer now. I can be. I have been." And then she remembers. She even says when she's kind of taking down all the guys before she gets back to Greymalkin Lane and goes back to the school, she remembers that I had a teacher who was even tougher than these guys, and he was the best at what he does, and what he does is not very nice. And she brings up that Wolverine himself taught her, mentored her, and she saw all the savagery that he had, and she employs it. And I think that that's a really interesting thing because Kate has gone through so many edgy streaks over the years. She's always tried to be like this rebellious teenager. Um, and it's nice to see her take a change towards edge, but
yeah.
justifiably. And that she is now this ringer for the mutants and for mutantdom. And I think that's a really, really cool thing to bring up as well, that Dugan did very well.
Yeah, yeah. No, the one thing I keep saying to pay attention to people is that, like, we had these very clear power centers before the collapse of Krakoa, the Quiet Council, and then the major players in the Quiet Council. And I'm thinking Charles Xavier. I'm thinking, to an extent, Colossus, because, you know, the consolidation of power. Certainly Destiny.
Well, but Colossus is also mind controlled by
Exactly, by the Russians.
yeah. So yeah,
So, but you had
100%.
these clear places that were the effective places that were keeping the machine running. Emma Frost, for example, too. Sebastian Shaw to a small extent, and the background with the
Mystique
economics.
Destiny. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now on the other side, who are the ones to pick up those pieces? It's very interesting. And so I'm telling people to pay close attention at those who you're seeing make those moves, and also the ones who are not, and also the ones that you haven't heard of. So, for example, in terms of Orcus resistance, there was one person who was massive to do with actually counteracting Orcus militarily, and that's Beast. And where is he right now? If you're
Okay.
reading
Yeah. No.
Wolverine,
Historically, yeah, I get it. I
yeah,
get
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
historically, not like in the most immediate,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like historically. And so, like, I'm trying to pay attention to these small little threads, that some of which are overt, aka Kate, and some of them are not really spoken to. And I want to see the role that they play in. I don't think necessarily there might be this grand rebuilding of Krakoa, but certainly the mutants will eventually rebound. And I want to know who are going to be the people who push that. And because it's been so unexpected, you know, with this fall of Xera has really brought upon people that I didn't anticipate being so important. Seeing kind of Destiny a absolute mess in the death
Yeah.
of
Sync or
Mystique.
Talon. being the
Yeah,
leaders of the X-Men. I did not see that coming because when
exactly.
I did not have really any familiarity with Sync before starting reading Dugan's X-Men, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden he shows up and he's a major player and he's a heavy
And he's
hitter,
doing
and
great. Yeah.
I'm like blown away by his characterization because not only is he now not young and idealistic, because that was the whole thing when he first started at the X-Men, is he,
Yeah.
he'd spent all this time in the vault, right? But he was still not known, like he doesn't know how to work with a team because
Yeah.
he was just working with Laura. And then he gets out of the vault and now he's on this team and he like doesn't know how to take anybody else's powers and use it appropriately. And he's raw. He's talented, but he's raw. And now you see him as like a grown man. Like
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
am the man and I am a full-fledged leader, and him and Talon taking over and really truly being the leaders. That was a big, you're right, big player, did not see coming out of left field, and I think will be very very impactful for mutants.
Yeah. And that's like my big takeaway from this Fall of X era, which is like the in the rebuild, whatever that ends up looking like, it's not looking like it's going to be the same power centers
Yeah.
whatsoever. There might be, small little areas where somebody might jump back into power naturally, but for the most part, it's coming from places that I didn't expect. I did not expect to for Exodus of all people to be this some surprisingly uniting figure amongst the wandering mutant, this Moses-like figure, literally walking side by side with his Messiah, Hope. How trippy is
Yeah.
that? And him kind of strategically making sure that all these mutants are leveraging their abilities to keep people fed, keep people healed, and then obviously you have the Mother Righteous component, which is just a different narrative thread. But yeah, I just think it's fascinating to see these people pop up who were formerly kind of not nothing,
Bums.
but yeah,
They're
but
D-listers for sure. Like
yeah,
nobody cared about Exodus until Hope came around
exactly.
in the Krakoa era. But what's interesting is that you say that is like he's walking with his Messiah. I would posture that his power is going to become exponentially more because he's going to become his own Messiah. Because
I think the same thing.
his
Absolutely.
power is going to be based off belief, right? And as like literally the panel where he looks up and he goes, "We're all going to be good." I saw this in a vision
Yeah,
forever ago. I did this exact same thing. We're good, dude. We will make it. The fact that he can even do that is unreal because like he will become his own believer in himself. And I think if his belief is there, like he doesn't need to believe in Hope, because he doesn't need people to believe in Hope for him to believe in Hope for him to then get power. It's like
exactly.
he's totally cut out the middleman. And if people believe in him and he believes in himself, then he's good to go.
And it's not lost on me that we're talking about two major things here, which is prophecy
Mm-hmm.
and this messianic figure. And he is literally and he's walking by hope and destiny, the prophecy and the
Literally.
Messiah. And he is
Yeah.
he is literally occupying both roles simultaneously in and of himself. That's not lost on me. And I think that's
Yeah.
purposeful to some extent to bring these two
Yeah.
figures next to him of all the people he could be with. It's hope and it's destiny.
Yeah.
This completely defeated destiny, I think,
Yeah.
it is so fascinating to watch.
Well, so that happens in, correct me if I'm wrong, but that happens in Immortal X-Men number 14, right?
Yes, I believe so. Because
Okay.
we see the death of Mystique previous to that, but yeah, which kind of
No.
leads.
I meant that scene with Exodus, Hope, and
Oh yes,
Destiny together.
that's
That takes
14, I
place at
think.
the end of
Yeah.
14.
Yes.
Couple that with the issue before, like in the reading order, is pretty much X-Men 25. And you
Yes.
take the religious allegory of what Kate's dealing with. Now Shadowcat. She took the name Shadowcat. Now she's Shadowcat again. Like you take that. That's a really interesting through line that I think we just zeroed in on, is that
I
like
think we just
there's
unlocked
a lot
something
of
here.
there's a lot of religious allegory.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting, and this is shifting gears a little bit from the religious, but
Yeah, totally.
what I was thinking about is that I really love where we're at in terms of like geopolitics with the
Oh,
Krakoa era. One, it was always cool to see the geopolitics of House of X, Powers of X, through how they're dealing with other nations, how other nations don't recognize their sovereignty. That to me is super, super cool. But I think that the geopolitics where they're at now is also more interesting because it's almost like everything's under Orcus occupation. And they
yes.
have this
Yeah.
like the resistance movement. And I think the easy example would be that, and like I'm not gonna dive into this because it's a whole can of worms, but like the easy reference would be Krakoa's Israel, mutants are Jews, this now occupying forces the Nazis, sort of thing. Like there's that kind
Yeah.
of triangle. I think that's lazy. I think that like none of that's really applicable in whole, and I think someone a lot smarter than me would need to untangle that. I would say it reminds me of, did you ever play the game Homefront?
Revolution. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, the first one.
Oh no, I played the
Okay.
whatever that one.
Okay, so Homefront, for those who don't know, is about basically Red Dawn,
Yeah,
where North Korea invades America. It like gains all this steam and then it invades America. And like when you play the first game, it was actually really well done and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, the sequel wasn't as great. The
yeah,
multiplayer wasn't good. It didn't
yeah,
like stick around, but it was really, really interesting because you see all of these resistance movements. And they even talk about it in 25 with the Avengers meet with the Unity Squad, right? They meet together in different parts of underground Manhattan, of in different parts of New York City subways, sewer system with the Morlocks, right? And they're sharing information. And then Kate goes to Araco and meets Woofer, who was introduced way previously, was
yeah,
saved by Captain Krakoa, Cyclops' Captain Krakoa in like X-Men number 7 or 8 when he first fights Dr. Stasis and he's introduced. Is now she goes, here's the spy. You tell me, you get a census of all of these mutants, what they do, and you tell me if you come across these 3 people. And so now there's this resistance network. And to me, that's super cool because it does remind me of that. But you also could look at like Nazi occupied France, right? Or the Dutch
yeah,
resistance.
for sure.
And all of these cool resistance movements that fought against tyranny, fought against oppression, fought against this occupying military force. And essentially, that's what Orcus is. Like, Orcus has everybody fooled. And now you put in a super powered, almost omnipotent force in the Children of Tomorrow, aka the Children of the Vault.
Yeah,
Like, that adds another wrinkle to it. I think this is so cool because it's grounded in like real history. There are elements taken from all these different things. There's religious allegories. There's historically speaking, I mean, the X-Men have always stood for marginalized people. So I think every marginalized person feels represented to a certain extent in the X-Men and what the X-Men stand for. And you have all of these different, it's this cosmic gumbo, to steal from I think you should leave. There's a cosmic gumbo going
yeah.
on with X-Men right now where I think it's just like a mixture of all these things that are really just like tickling my twine right now. Like I really, really, really love what's going on.
Yeah, and you raise like a great point where it's like that with them being representatives of so many marginalized groups, that inability to pinpoint exactly what this is a reference to is the point, I think, to
Yeah.
an extent. Like it is, I think they always do. Like sometimes, obviously, certain writers are more heavy-handed than others, so they're going to be ones that maybe are a little bit more on the nose than others. But there is always this contingent of like, oh, I can see a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and I think that's very much purposeful. Where it's like I feel like there's this unspoken rule when it comes to writing X-Men, which it's like keep it complex, but keep it
Yep.
vague, keep it comprehensive, but keep it general. You know what I mean? So
But the
like
generality and the complexity is lies within the generality, but the generality
exactly.
also is the
They're
simplicity.
intertwined, which is
Yeah.
why,
And like,
yeah.
yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, which is why I feel like X-Men is so challenging to write at times because you
Mhm.
have to to do it right. You have to straddle that line between like I can see things and I'm like, oh, that's me in there, or that's them in there. But at the same time, many people from many walks can do that, and that's not
Yeah.
an easy thing to be able to
No,
achieve.
no, definitely not. And I think that's also why, like, I am not a Jewish person, so I don't really want to make an opinion on the mutants or Jews, Krakoa's Israel thing. But I think that what's really interesting about that is, yes, to me, it seems like really on the nose. It really seems like it's not all that complex, like to identify, but I think it's really complex to explain because writers purposely, like you said, leave it vague. And I think that if someone of that people group, like if a Jewish scholar wanted to look into it and dive into it and study that, they could, and they could find through lines and they could find references to things that happened in actual history. But I also think that you could say the same thing for any civil rights activist reading
Oh, yeah,
reading X-Men. You could do it for any LGBTQ plus activist. Like any of these people could look at X-Men and go, I see our struggle in that.
Yeah.
And then you have people like me who realistically don't have that same struggle. The X-Men do not represent me, but they represent my support. They represent what I should do is help anybody who needs help. Doesn't matter. Like, Jean says a really interesting thing to Scott in the Hellfire Gala where Scott is leaving, and she goes, you will help any human and mutant, even if it hurts you. Something along those lines. And he says, thank you. And she goes, that wasn't a compliment. To me, at that point, I'm actually siding with Scott on this. His whole role, his whole thing is like, dude, we're bridging the gap. He believes in what Xavier's initial reaction, like his initial stance was. And he's true school, man. He's going to stick with it. Now, he's changed throughout the years. Like during Utopia, he was a little bit more of like a mutant supremacist. And he had these like
bordered on terrorist vibes.
Yeah. Where he's like, oh, you know, we all go through a radical phase. I'll excuse him. Right. But it's really interesting to see that, like, what I resonate with is very much the Captain Americas and the Cyclops, where you help who needs help. Doesn't matter if they're different than you. It doesn't matter. And honestly, it doesn't matter if they want you dead. If they need help, the right thing to do, the moral thing to do would be to help that person. And obviously that's really reductive and that's different for a lot of people in different circumstances. And there's nuance to that, but that's one of the things that's always attracted me to Cyclops specifically and Captain America. And you see it present in this run of everything and what the X-Men have stood for in this current Krakoa era. It's like, it's all about just helping people. Who cares whether they want you dead? Cyclops goes, doesn't matter. Like, you deserve help because you are alive. And I'm the person who can help you. I'm going to help you. And Jean is changing her tune. She's changing it to, we got to worry about mutants first. And I don't think she's 100% wrong in that either, because it is a literal life and death scenario for mutants. And I think, man, dude, this book gets me, like, this series gets me fired up because there's so much to it. It is so dense. I think that honestly, English scholars could study the Krakoa era and truly find some very meaningful, very poignant things that are really meaty and fleshy thematically.
Yeah. And you know, I've thought about this, the whole position that Cyclops has, specifically from that conversation, which is like, I think it's very purposeful having Scott almost look like this remnant of a bygone era. He's in his old
costume. He's in his old costume.
He's very Claremontian in the way where he's almost the sole representative of the original Charles Xavier pitch to the world, which is, we can come together. And they've there's a weird line between supremacy and separatism in the specifically the mutant context, which it's like, some would say, oh, they're just siphoning themselves off to protect themselves. Others are like, no, obviously Orcus would disagree with that. And they're like, no, they want to put themselves in a position of supremacy to conquer over us. That is one thing, but it's very, sure.
I would argue that it's and not to just refute anything you say. I think I would just describe it as isolationism, because it's not supremacy and it's not separatism, but it is this isolationism that exists in the middle where, yes, we understand that we could destroy you if we really wanted to, but we don't want to. We want to just be left alone and help where we can. Like, they don't want beef with anybody. And I think that's what's really interesting about this, is that isolationism. I would just describe it as that.
For sure. And I think that's a great point. And I think it is purposeful having Scott be that sole person now, but keeping him there, because I do think that this fundamental ideological difference is going to come to head, especially in the Fall of X era, when the state of Krakoa no longer exists. They are going to have to adopt a new modus operandi for whatever they want to rebuild going forward. And this is going to be the clash. Who do they go with? And this is not the first time that I think Scott has been used to represent the ideological differences within mutantdom at any given time. He's essentially occupied the other side of the role, as you kind of talked about during the Utopia era. And so, I think I'm excited to see I assume I already know the answer to this, that I think ultimately when it's all said and done, whatever reset we end up seeing on the other side, that it will be kind of Scott's approach, or formerly Xavier's type of approach, that will land, because I feel like Hickman was very explicit in like, let's take this idea to the furthest extent of what if we went with essentially Magneto's vision originally, where we build our own state and we reign supreme there. And again, not in a supremacy way, but like, this is our thing. We're taking Mars. Like, this is ours.
We're terraforming a planet that you wasted.
That is such a Magneto way to do it. Like, we're taking this, do something about it. Oh, you can't? Sorry about it. If you don't like it, sorry. But here's a bunch of pharmaceuticals that we're going to improve the lives of everybody, basically, but Wakanda, who has no interest in it because they can do it themselves. But and the Great Britain, who doesn't like us. But I think that's such an interesting thing where there's going to be this ideological shift back, I think. Where, again, these things kind of go back and forth. They ebb and flow. But I think it was very explicit in the way that they were always going to have a major shift in what the average mutant on Krakoa would view geopolitically, or just their position in humanity, as this separate thing. Like, we're no longer trying, and I think a lot of it is analogous to like the whole assimilation argument too, like retaining one's culture versus all blending into this one melting pot. These are, again, very debated things, even amongst, real life outside of comics. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing that like now they're going to have to make a choice. Now that the state is gone and they need to rebuild something, who wins out? Well, I don't see a clear ideology right now because they're in survival mode. It's very Days of Future Past. Like, let's stop dying first, then we can restore our power center. And this almost segues perfectly into what I wanted to talk to you about, having been caught up. And, I like to talk to people who are caught up in Krakoa because there's this whole idea of phases of X-Men and the inevitable reset. We're not saying they're going back to the mansion, but the Krakoa era.
I think they could. I think they could.
I mean, it would be basically X-Men's Brand New Day, like a hard reset. It could happen. It could happen. Totally. I leave that on the table. But I do like to ask people who are caught up, like, how are you feeling about Krakoa? Like, do you think, would you like it to keep going? Have you had enough of it? Like, what is your general, now that we're 4 years in, because it's 2019. So 4 years in, what are you thinking?
That's really hard. On one hand, I love aspects of it and I hate aspects of it. I do kind of hate that a lot of mutants have fallen by the wayside.
Yeah.
And the reason being, it's focused so much on the Quiet Council. And I think it focused on it for way too long. I think that they should have dissolved the Quiet Council a long time ago. I think that it should have lasted maybe 2 years at the most before it dissolved. And they brought it up. Like, they've brought it up at different times when they talk about the dissolution, specifically like during Inferno and then after leading up to Sins of Sinister. So it's not like they've never brought it up, but I think that what I really don't like about Krakoa is that guys like, and I'm biased because this is my favorite X-Man and my favorite mutant is Strong Guy. It's Guido.
Oh, okay.
I love him. I think he's awesome. I think he's an interesting character that you could give new life to. Why is he not being used? Why isn't Blob being used? Even in X-Force, Black Tom Cassidy is no longer being used. They didn't explore his alcoholism. They didn't explore Sage's alcoholism, really. You could have done that in X-Force. Like, you could have fleshed out characters that, like, they're not as popular. I think, like, D-listers do deserve a spot in the sunlight, and I think most D-listers could be turned into A-listers, absolutely. In the same way that, like, dude, Marvel, when they took Iron Man in 2007, 2008, and made this fantastic movie, the average public knew Tony Stark as Ghostface Killer. They did not know him as Iron Man. Like even Black Sabbath made a song called Iron Man that like wasn't really about Iron Man.
No.
Like tangentially at the most, because they didn't even understand the character. So you can take these characters that like he's always been important in Marvel comics. Like, it's not like he was some nobody, but like to the general public, right? But now you could take some nobody in comics and make them somebody. Like Doug and Warlock, right? They're integral to Krakoa. So integral that Doug, who died in Extinction Agenda, nobody really cared about. He was just part of the New Mutants.
Yeah.
Like, all the New Mutants cared that he died, but like Storm reincarnated as her teenage self wasn't really like all that bent out of shape about it. like he was nobody. Now he's somebody. He has a seat on the Quiet Council. And when you just like when you dissolve the Quiet Council, you give more credence to the layman, the average mutant. And I understand the argument against it, right? I kind of argue against the council, but also like they brought up that like most of the mutants on Krakoa don't know what's in their best interest.
Yeah.
They don't have any means to protect themselves because they do not have quote unquote useful mutations. And that to me is really interesting because it's this argument of like monarchy or like oligarchy really versus democracy. And what could happen if they dissolve the Quiet Council? And I wish that Krakoa would have done that a lot earlier.
Yeah.
That's something that I wish could have been, it could have been like dove into more. It could have made for some really interesting plot lines. I wish that they had highlighted some like less common, less popular, even Juggernaut. Like he's just now joining the X-Men, same with Jubilee and Dazzler. Like they've been out of it for so long. Well, like, yeah, you throw them in and then at the Hellfire Gala, and then literally a panel later, it all goes to hell. But like you could have been using them this entire time. Additionally, though, I think this is the high point of X-Men comics. I would argue that it's up there with Dark Phoenix Saga in terms of craft. Like what we've seen specifically in issue 25, I've sung my praises about it. What we're seeing is like that's on par with Dark Phoenix Saga, I believe. I believe it's up there. I think this is the high point. I said it earlier, it'll be canonized as when people think about X-Men, they will think about the Krakoa era for quite a long time. Just like they think about the school and the original Uncanny X-Men and those weird blue and yellow costumes. Like this will be immortalized. Pardon the pun because of Immortal X-Men, but it will be immortalized in X-Men canon for sure. And I love it. I really do. I think it's some of the best writing that has been coming out of Marvel for at least a decade. I think that X-Men since 2019 is blowing Avengers out of the water.
Not even close. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like insane, which wasn't the case 10 years ago.
Oh no, not at all.
X-Men has had a tough history, literally like in universe and IRL. Because like they've gone through so much canonically and with their writing change-ups. There's not a lot of consistency with the writing at times. And so I really love what we're seeing. It seems like it's all very consistent. Yeah, you have some stinkers of events, but honestly, most events are stinkers like we talked about earlier. Most get forgotten, most series get forgotten. Who cares, right? We move on. But I think the Krakoa era really, I do truly love it. I think that it's one of those things that if you have not read X-Men ever, get a general understanding of Genosha and Utopia, and then just start from House of X, Powers of X. Move on, read that way. I think that's really all you need to know before moving in. Have maybe read through some Wikipedia articles about like who a character is. And I highlight this too on my own channel. Use fandom. It used to be like Wikia, like Wiki A. For all these different like fandoms and stuff. Dude, use the Marvel fandom. You learn so much about characters. You don't know who a character is. You just look them up by name.
That's what I did.
Everything will come up. Their power sets. They'll rank them by intelligence even. They'll give them a scale. Like it's all these things that really help you as a comic fan learn. I don't necessarily 100% buy the argument that comics are hard to get into. I'm 50-50 on it because 50% I go, yeah, there's a long history. Anything that's been running for 80 plus years, like, yes, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot you need to know. But at the same time, like you have Google, use Google. Like if you are unsure about what is volume 3 of this thing, look at the year, look at who wrote it. Then when you're at and you have your phone, like use it on your phone, go up to the rack or the back issue boxes and go, okay, it says this month, year, this writer, this is this time period of that comic. And I think that it's a resource, and that fandom specifically is a resource that really helps you if you don't know anything. But I also think that there's some little elbow grease you got to put in to truly understand something in general. Like there's stuff you and I don't even understand.
Oh, of course.
We got to put in the elbow grease to understand it. We got to go back and research. Like I'm doing I could plug it later a little bit, but I'm doing a Starman, working on a Starman video and a Secret Six video for my YouTube channel. Like, I gotta go back and do research. I gotta go back and read. I gotta go read articles. I gotta go read interviews. I gotta go read the actual comics. There's elbow grease that needs to be put in. But if you want to know the Krakoa era, start with House of X, Powers of X, get a general understanding of Genosha and Utopia, and use fandom as necessary. If you need to know who a character is, just look them up. And I promise you will have a much easier time. And this is a great time to start reading X-Men.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I've gone back and forth with the Krakoa thing because it's like, this is undeniably one of my favorite eras. But I know not everything can last forever. And I thought one of the cool things about Krakoa was that it was that kind of fresh start. So you start with House and Powers of X, and then it goes into a million different directions. And you had all those really great Dawn of X series, which went into Reign of X and then Destiny and now Fall. And so I loved that kind of reset. It's its own, and it was actually a very similar sensation to Ultimate Spider-Man when I read, where it's like, this is a new starting point, you can jump, and obviously that was the birth of a new universe, so that was literally a fresh start.
Totally.
So it's unique in that regard, but at the same time, I loved how it was just like a clean new status quo. But the longer that time goes, the less that applies to current state. And that's a natural thing, is where the accessibility of a new era wanes as more comes out. Naturally, that's just going to happen. Eventually, the Ultimate Universe became super inaccessible after 15 years. So
yeah, I never even read any of it. I've only ever read Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Spider-Man, and I'm like scared to go back and read most of it, because
I would leave it alone if I were you.
I think the Ultimates, like the original run of the Ultimates,
Mark Miller's,
probably, that's probably all I would read, but I don't even know if I care to. Ultimate Spider-Man is really good though, and I highly recommend anybody read it.
Oh yeah, I'm a massive fan of
it. Has, I would argue that is the best Spider-Man for a good chunk of it, at least, is the best Spider-Man that's ever been written.
Everything up to basically Ultimatum is like delicious, but
the ending of Ultimate Spider-Man is one of those things where you're just like,
yeah, it picks back up. I think they have the Ultimate Comics rebrand. Things get weird for a little bit, then spoiler, death of Spider-Man, and then
but the panel of him and Ben walking off into the sunset, and he's like, "You did good, kid." It's like, beautiful. Oh, dude, breaks your heartstrings, dude.
Facts.
Nips them like the old harpies in Hercules, dude. Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
that's an amazing panel.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, as Krakoa goes on, it becomes less and less accessible. That reading list gets bigger and bigger. And I do think we are due for a reset, not a hard reset. However, not until I feel like the full promises of House and Powers of X are fully realized. And that's my preference. That's what I'd like. There are still things that haven't been addressed. The lives of Moira and you cannot leave me on this robot Moira era. You can't do this to me. That has to be resolved properly, please. But there are some things that I just want tied up. There is this mutant versus human ascendancy, then with the post-humans and the machines coming together, all those things that we saw early on. And again, Hickman's not around anymore. So I know to an extent, I may not ever see the answer to a lot of those things.
Yeah,
but
I talked with Yuhu about that, actually. That you're seeing three different authors' visions.
Exactly.
And there's a certain level of, from the outside looking in, that you have to understand it's not going to mesh completely. Yeah.
And sometimes I tell myself, maybe I just need to let go. Like maybe
cut the cord, brother.
And again, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, Hickman or bust. Like, no, I love again, if Hickman doesn't leave, we never get Gillen. So I'm totally fine. Like Vita Ayala did some really great stuff on New Mutants. Like there's lots of people who stepped into that role that we probably never would have gotten if he had stuck around, because he, again, had a very fixed vision. He had his set of writers. He was working directly with Jerry Dugan and Tini Howard, and just he had his team.
Even Benjamin Percy.
Yeah, Ben Percy.
He was writing Wolverine from the jump. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, God bless Ben Percy. How he has not stopped, renumbered, changed anything. I respect.
Same with X-Force. I mean, he's been on all 42 issues or 43 issues of X-Force. Yeah.
Say what you want about the pace, and yes, has there been a tremendous amount of progress in his 40-something issues? not really. But at the same time, I like Ben Percy. But all that
Wolverine had a ton of progress.
Wolverine
I'll
has
interject with that.
yeah.
It had a lot of progress.
It's X-Force, I think. That's really slow rolling. But at that same time, like I love what they're doing. I am totally down for you want to do a couple more years of Krakoa, I'm down. But if like on the other end of Fall of X is a clean reset to make it re-accessible for a new audience to jump in, or even if they offer a title for those people. So like maybe the Krakoa related titles continue through the Immortals and the X-Men Reds and all these things keep going, and you do have a more accessible, like maybe a group of mutants do eventually, maybe they deal with the Orcus thing and they are able to live fine and have a traditional X-Men team and another title that will loosely connect to Krakoa, but will be the accessible title. I'm totally fine with that too. I think there's a way to do that. I guess I just don't want them to do that hard boom. I love new X-Men by like Morrison, but like that is what I feel in the back of my mind. Like we're headed to like that hard, like new team, new vision, new era. Thanks,
Yeah.
Hickman. Bye.
You want to get into predictions? Can I say my predictions?
Let's do that.
So I'm going to give what I don't want to happen, what I'd be okay with happening, and then what I would really like to see happen. Okay. What I don't want to happen is I don't want them to wrap everything up in like a little teeny bow. Right? Yeah. Like I don't want to see it all come together. It's all fine. Even if they dissolve the Quiet Council, I think that's a concession. I think that's moving into something I'd be okay with, but I don't really want to see that. I want to see something different. I want to see that the stakes, like I said earlier, the stakes have never been higher. Well, I want to see the consequences of those stakes, right?
Yep.
Now I'd be okay with if there was a hard reset, but I'll qualify that. So I know that they've said that when Moira dies, that life in that universe gets completely terminated. Am I correct in that? Right.
Yeah.
What if it didn't, though? What if it was just business as usual for the people in that universe? So what if they do defeat Orcus and they do take them all down, but now Moira died and it reset, but their universe is still the same? Meaning they now can do kind of whatever they want. They fixed it. It's not necessarily in a clean bow, but like they can rebuild and do something different. But you have the main 616 universe of hard reset. They're still in the school and only one member remembers or something like that. And then you don't have to talk about it. They could just go, hey, that was a weird dream. But so for the people who want a brand new start, which I'm sure there's some, like you said, you don't really want a hard reset because you're getting flashbacks from Morrison. I get that.
Again, I love Morrison. I'm just scared they're going to do that now. Yeah.
Yeah. But like there are people who want that. I can respect that. Not that I necessarily want that. And then you just have this X-Men team that exists within the new canon of everything. All the things that are happening with the Avengers and all these other things can kind of coexist a little bit. Maybe they've changed a little bit. Maybe the timeline is just slightly different. They're not necessarily dealing with Orcus stuff. They're dealing with something else. Totally cool with that. I think I can live with that. But if those, and this is moving into what I can live with, it's a spectrum. It's like a gradient. Like what I don't want, what I do can live with, and then what I can live with too, what I do want. For those people in that same universe, meaning it could also be in the same universe and you fix it before, and you don't have to worry about the universe collapsing. Having red, green, blue, and gold as teams. And so when we were talking before we started recording that I started reading Extinction Agenda.
Yep.
And we actually might have said that on recording. I don't remember. I know I referenced it, but there's the New Mutants, there's X-Men, and there's X Factor, and they're all different. And none of them are training the same way. None of them are teaching their teams the same way. They're led differently. All of those things I think are super interesting. Bring that back. So now you have 4 teams, red, green, blue, and gold, which is unofficially what they're doing now with X-Men Green and X-Men Red, because Moira does reference X-Men Green, but that's just the X-Men book. And then X-Men Red is X-Men Red. Yeah. So like they are 2 different things, much like blue and gold. Bring that back. Have different teams. Like it's very reminiscent of things we've seen in other media, specifically like Assassin's Creed, where there's different enclaves of the assassins, right?
Yeah.
They all have the same goal, but they operate independently. Maybe there's some general oversight over all of them, but like they do their own thing. They have their own missions. They're led their own way. There's something different, kind of like the wizarding schools in Harry Potter, even like the ones from Poland, the ones from America, the ones from France, like they're all run differently. Do that, right? So Green is run by like Rogue and Gambit. Like, why not? Bring Gambit has been just disappeared basically for a while, even though he's got his own series. Nobody's reading that or buying it. Get him and Rogue, they're green, right? Red is still Storm and the Uraka. Like, keep that. Get blue and gold, like Scott and Jean can still be leaders if they want to be, or they're not the leaders. And now red is Colossus, or not red, gold is like Colossus and someone else. I don't know. Take your pick. And then blue is someone else. Like those are interesting. And it's been done before. It's been done within the past decade or 10 years. So that's fine. But I think there's room with a good writer. You can take the same concept and totally flip it on its head and make it interesting. That's what I would want to see. I would want to see like 4 distinct teams. Like, get rid of, I hate to say it, get rid of like New Mutants, Marauders, Hellions, all these other
they've done everything they need to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Get rid of all this side stuff. So now you're not buying 8 X books, you're buying 4 at most, right? And they can interact. Like there's no reason they need to be in a vacuum, but you can turn it into more whose like plot are we stopping this week? And you do 4 issues of this arc, and then you do 3 issues of the next arc, and they can intermix. And maybe it's red and green and blue and gold. They have not an event, but an arc together, and then you can do different combinations. All of these characters, say there's 6 to a team. That's 24 characters that you can work with, and they can interact in all these different ways. Now that sounds like a lot, but when you're writing a team book like X-Men, you should already be good at writing big groups of people.
Yeah.
So that's what I would like to see. With what will probably happen is probably they're going to hard reset. Like I'm going to be honest with you. You can feel it. I feel like my ears
with
are
that MCU
ringing.
coming. I can see it.
They're gonna reset. Honestly, comic book movies is a whole other thing. That's like a whole other podcast in and of itself.
We'll get to that in part 2.
But I think I really do think that they will probably just hard reset.
Yeah.
Or they'll tie everything up into a neat little bow, and it'll probably go back to normal, and they'll dissolve the Quiet Council probably. And hot take, I'd like to see Charles Xavier gone, like Magneto.
So
I kind of want him to be
dead.
No, dead. Like I kind of want to see him just.
I wouldn't lose sleep.
No, yeah. Who would really? The guys at the comic book shop that are 40 and don't like when characters change at all? Like
the Chandelar, Claremont era fans. Yeah,
the guys who think that Sam Wilson should stay Falcon and not Captain America, like those guys who don't see character growth or title changes.
Fighting over like 2005 issues. Yeah,
Miles Morales is Miles Morales and Spider-Man like that.
Like, bro, those guys, 12 years, man.
Yeah, I don't care about those guys. Those guys they're not even really the ones buying comics anymore. They buy 3, and 2 of them are Spawn titles. Like, who cares? But kill him off. Do him like Magneto, where you don't bring him back. You just don't. Magneto and the Professor X will be brought back at some point. Corporations have not necessarily had great respect for the dead, historically speaking. So that also applies to their creations, like Magneto. So I think they'll probably be brought back, but don't keep him around. Wait a while. Wait like 5 or 6 years before you actually bring him back.
Yeah, and thinking about your multiple teams pitch, which I really love, it immediately started ringing era of like a time, because I was trying to reconcile these things where it's like, okay, how could they have a book that is close to a harder reset, or at least tonally similar to like a nice jumping on point, while simultaneously keeping some level of continuity with what happened, all that depth, all that heaviness. And I immediately went back to that point when Wolverine and the X-Men and Uncanny X-Men were happening simultaneously, one led by quote unquote evil Cyclops and Wolverine. And Wolverine's X-Men was light and happy and in the school and is accessible. You have all these new mutants popping around you can learn about, and it was much closer to a classic X-Men book. And on the other hand, you had Uncanny X-Men, which was completely tied into all the continuity from previous eras. Nothing reset there. It was not really that accessible, but they weren't trying to pitch it as that. And it makes me wonder if there is this nice middle zone where there's whether people like it or not, there's gonna be this MCU synergy movement thing. It's gonna happen
100%.
whether you
they
like
changed
it or not.
Kamala Khan's. They already changed her powers. Yeah.
If they did that to her, imagine what they're gonna do to the larger team. If you really think,
I don't know, they actually might have more protection because they are larger heroes.
Maybe
that's the thing. Do you really think that they're valuing Miss Marvel like that? Like,
well, obviously not. They obviously don't give a shit about her. But
yeah, that's my point. Like,
it just makes me. I could only just imagine the meeting pitch, and you got Kevin Feige sitting there with the head of the Marvel Comics, and he's like, "All right, so we got the Marvels coming into the MCU."
Yo, who is the head of Marvel Comics?
Like I actually don't know. Now that I think about it,
I know that
because I know Jim Lee's over at DC, but
yeah, not anymore.
Oh, not anymore. Oh, yeah, he did step down, didn't he?
Yeah, but I know that CB Cebulski, who is a problematic individual,
well, yeah, he's
was editor-in-chief for like the Spider books and like some other things.
He still is.
I don't know if he's over all of comics though. Let's look it up, add it in post, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll make a TikTok about it.
We'll take a look at that. But I could just imagine that meeting where, Kevin Feige, he's like, okay, where the mutants are coming into the MCU, we're psyched. And there's an excellent opportunity, have a little synergy. We're going to push some comics. So just give me a rough understanding. Okay, what are you guys doing in X-Men right now? And how can we make these things link up? Imagine their face. Well, there's this thing called House and Powers of 10. And, Apocalypse, right? And, all the bad guys you haven't introduced yet. Well, they're all working together in the UN of sorts. And the rest of the world's reacting to them. And they have resurrection protocols. The 5... Imagine trying to pitch that. The resurrection protocols. So naturally, they're going to be like, yeah, put them back in the school. Yeah, we'll do that. Let's go with that. Like, or at least something more familiar. I think something, and I think best case scenario is we get something maybe closer to like Astonishing X-Men from the early 2000s, where it was a classic team-based book, but with really meta storylines. So like anybody could jump in, Cyclops. If you don't know Emma Stone or Emma Frost, you're gonna meet her now. But you got Emma, and you got Beast over there, like familiar faces, some non-familiar faces, and you got Armor, and they're just doing really weird things. But it's a classic team-based X-Men book, and I think that would be best case scenario. Like They get a really good writing team that throws the bones to you. You might see like a little Moira reference in the corner there, and you're like, oh, I know that. Or you might see a quick thing where they're like seeing some document about a Dominion somewhere, and you're like, oh, I know that reference. Just something. What I don't want is just them back to the school. Magneto's trying to knock down a bridge. Like I don't want to do that anymore.
The stakes have been too high for that.
There's no way they could.
Dude, going from a nation to a school,
like
that's like going from a Ferrari to a moped.
Yeah,
like what's the point?
Yeah, it just makes me
saving gas.
Because we have upped the stakes before, and they have done moments where things have but every time they had upped the stakes and reset, it was much needed at that time. Where I don't think we're in the same position. Like Krakoa is good. Like it's not like some of the previous eras where just like, oh my God, what are you guys doing? Like reset it, please, God. This time we're in a good place, so it's like a reluctant thing. But I feel good about it overall, just because the Krakoa era has gone longer than I thought it was, at least. So to be honest, when they announced Immortal and Red, I already thought at that time when we're coming out of Reign, there was a real lull in Reign where I was like, ugh. Okay, like again, I like a lot of the series from there. I mean, Hellions is one of my favorite period of the Krakoa era, but yeah, it wasn't like a great time for the era. And so when they announced that, I already thought we were heading towards the end there. So the moment they announced those two titles, I was like, oh, we're on like OT right now. We're like this borrowed time. Like hell yeah, like I didn't know this was gonna keep going. And so yeah,
and they've been running for over a year at this point.
Exactly, and
so yeah, it's been a while.
They're still great. And so at this point, asking for anything more is me being spoiled, and I could admit that. Like I've gotten about as in comics, how often do you see someone set up something and have other writers, multiple other writers say, yeah, we'll play ball in your court. Like, how often does that happen in comics? Like, almost never. So I'll take it. If you know what, like, if they are like, okay, we can't do this forever. Like, we love Hickman too, but guys, come on. Like, he didn't invent X-Men. We'll eventually have to have somebody else great step onto the title and want to do their own thing, who maybe
Chip
doesn't.
Starsky. Chip Starsky.
Oh, I could only pray that he would. But yeah, and I think I'd be spoiled to ask for too much more beyond what they've given us, other than to just don't kick Kieran before he's done with what they're doing. You know what I mean? That's all I ask, is let them, whatever their plans are, let them finish that, and then have a blast.
Yeah.
I'm also talking like I'm not gonna buy whatever they put out anyways.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Dude, I'm a captive audience at this point. They're gonna get my money.
They got me.
No matter what they do.
I'm a Spider-Man fan. So do you really
I still buy Spider-Man? Yeah, I still buy Spider-Man.
I still buy ASM every, other week. So like I know what it means to truly be in the trenches.
Yeah, hot take. I actually don't think it's all that bad. Like, I think it's pretty good.
Neither do I. I think, like, I feel like
I said, I'm easy to please.
Well, I feel like I'm crazy when I'm on my show weekly saying, like, hey, I don't think everything Zeb Wells is doing is bad. Now, do I like every decision he's made? Of course not. I think that's natural. But, like, at no point have I ever been like, this is a trash run, because I don't think it is. I like the Gang War stuff.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like about it, John Romita Jr.'s art. Don't like it.
Listen, you are speaking to someone who has kept their mouth shut about it, because I felt like he was an icon that I don't want to slander. I've never liked his art, to be honest with you.
I don't care.
He's
like a nepo baby, dude. Like, there's no way he gets a job in comics if his dad wasn't.
The last time I liked
his dad, super talented.
Ooh, now that's an icon. But
like, John Romita Jr. is not good. Like, let's be real about that. Dude, you take the most average. Like, dude, do you think Alessandro Capuccio is a worse artist than John Romita Jr.? Dude, Alessandro Capuccio is writing or drawing for Moon Knight, which has some of the best style in comics, indie or mainstream.
Gorgeous. The coloring on that.
You put him on Spider-Man, you got your next McFarlane, dude. Seriously.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, we're kind of moving off X-Men, but
yeah.
What is your actual prediction, though? What do you think is actually going to happen? I know what you want to happen, but what do you think is actually going to happen?
I think you get a soft reboot. I think there will be a title to continue some of the threads from the Krakoa era. I think that we are closer to Krakoa being like a Wakanda in terms of like a pervasive setting, that like, I think we are past the point where Krakoa as a setting for mutants to habitate. I don't think Krakoa is Genosha or Utopia. I think at this point it's going to be treated closer to Wakanda. Some runs will play in that more than others, just like Black Panther. Some take place in Wakanda, some don't. And I think it'll be the same deal. I think it remains kind of this thing in the background that some writers will show interest in. I think there will be a title. Maybe it's Ewing, maybe it's Gillen, that will have
I'd be okay with either. I'd be okay with either of those writers.
Which will have closer ties to what you'd call the Krakoa era. And I think everything else will be... the Fall of X is happening. Like, Uncanny Spider-Man's coming. That has very little to do with Krakoa. So we're technically already starting to see the remnants, or not the remnants, but the threads of a post-Krakoa looking X-Men. And so we're starting to see that. Like, what does it look like past the Krakoa era? And so I think you're going to have a very accessible mainline X-Men book. So I think if any major pillar of X-Men is to go, it's going to be Duggan. Like, I think Duggan's going to take it to the crazy extent.
Yeah.
And he might step onto another X title for sure. But like, his X-Men title is going to go into the hands of, that's going to become the accessible title. I think there will be, whether it's renamed to Uncanny, whatever, but I think there's going to be a clean, this is the book that you put the new people in, and then there might be something on the background, and then I think you'll have a million random team books, maybe 5-issue solicits here and there. And I think, so that's what I think. I think you're going to have bones thrown, but for the most part, I think they're letting Gillen and Al Ewing finish up what they have to do. Let Duggan do Fall of X, and I think it's done after that for the most part. That's my guess, if I really had to do a guess.
Damn, you are cynical.
Yeah.
I feel like mine was way more optimistic.
Yeah. And that's just me speaking, having
Oh, that's your
watched them for a long
pragmatic.
time.
Yeah, that's your realistic perspective. I get
Yeah,
that
I've
totally.
just seen them for a while, and I think X-Men is doing great right now, but I just don't see them see this mass influx of new potential readers and let them walk into what Hickman built. I just don't see them doing that. Like, I think
Yeah,
to them, when they see what we see in Hickman, they see as massive inaccessibility to
that's
them.
true. Yeah, and
Yeah.
going back to what we said about new comic readers, like, I think what I said can come off abrasive if you take it the wrong way. Like, it's not that I don't want new comic book
Of
readers
course.
to read. I totally understand how inaccessible this stuff is. There is elbow grease that needs to go into it, but I also do err on the side of like X-Men where it stands right now
Yeah.
is atrociously hard to get into.
Yes.
Um, yeah, it's easy for me to say start with, general understanding of this and then move on from this point. That's still 300 issues of things. Like
Yeah.
that's 4 years of writing across 4.5, really 4.5 years of writing across 15 titles. Now, not all of them ran concurrently, but that's a lot, man. That it really is a lot. And so I do think that we do need a somewhat of a reset where
Yeah.
we need to allow new comic book readers to come in. Someone commented, like, when the TikTok I made when I said something about issue 25, like the one I
Yeah.
made before filming this, someone commented and goes, "What would I need to read to understand that storyline?"
Oh,
My friend,
everything.
all of it. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
if you had told me Sins of Sinister, I'd go, read Inferno,
Yeah.
like,
Less than you
read from
think. Yeah.
Inferno on, but like if you're trying to understand, or like Judgment Day, it's like, dude, it's self-contained, like,
Judgment
don't
Day you
worry
could
about
jump
it.
into. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, man, there's no way you can understand where we're at right now if you don't
Yeah.
start from the beginning. Honestly, if you don't start from Planet Sized,
Oh
like if you
yeah.
don't start from
Well,
Planet
you can't
Size
read
on,
Red if you haven't read Planet Size. So yeah,
yeah, like you have to start even earlier than House of X, Powers of X,
for
ultimately.
sure.
And so I really feel for new comic book fans specifically who are trying to get into X-Men. My homie, Hot Tub, weirdly enough, Hot Tub homies, commented on one of my TikToks asking for recommendations on where to jump into X-Men. And I gave him some good ones, I think, in a 10-minute long TikTok, but it's still so hard to be like, oh, you're just jumping in.
Yeah.
Like, shoot. But at the same time, I don't want to discourage people from jumping in, because the
Yeah.
more comic book readers we have, the better, because then that means the more people who are inspired to read comics, who are now inspired to write comics, we get better comics, man. We get better comic content.
Absolutely.
We get more comic content. And that's what I want. If you're watching this, if you've made it this far and you have no clue about the Krakoa era, start. And if you need to stop, that's okay. Maybe wait for the reset in a year.
Take your time.
Take your time. You got
Yeah.
plenty of time. Read it like we read the 90s storylines. We're not worried about the time frame. And you'll just pick up where you pick up.
Totally. Now
Yeah.
I want to take a little bit of a left turn if you don't mind.
That's fine, dude.
So
We've exhausted an hour and a half to 2 hours on
we've hit X-Men
on
hard. I
X-Men
expected that though.
alone.
I
So yeah,
expected
no,
that.
that's fine. That's why I'm on here,
Yeah,
dude. Why I'm
for
on
sure.
here.
So, I always like to start with people's background, but I always like to, towards the end of a discussion with somebody, I want to talk about your content creation journey and what your goals are for that. Because I've noticed with the people I've talked to, very different goals for people. And I always like to joke with me, when I got into content creation, it was purely a game of community. I just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
talk to people about comics. Right now, time of recording, I am in the 420 follower range, and I am already starting to bump up against the number that is making me anxious every day because there's a little
Yeah.
bit too much engagement. I just like,
Yeah.
I wanted to meet some people, make some friends, enjoy. I didn't care about the game because I'm 29 and I'm washed and I'm done. So I'm not
You're
interested
not
in being
washed, dude.
famous.
No, dude.
I'm mentally washed. But
Dude.
I am. I've never looked for uh fame or anything big. But some people do. Some people want to make a career of this. Some people want to get into video production. Some people want to write reviews professionally. So I always like to ask, like, what is your goals with all of this content creation?
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
And it boils down to, I taught media studies at a high school for my first year out of college. I went to film school, which isn't a degree you can necessarily get many jobs with. So that was like kind of easy, and it paid me more than I'd ever made before at a job. Um, More than I actually make now, weirdly enough. But I had to deal with a lot. So I taught for a year, and I realized I really love lecturing. I really love hearing myself talk, but I also feel like I have really important things to say. And not in a like prideful, haughty way, like everybody needs to listen to me, but more that like I feel like I truly could inform somebody on their opinion or something they want to do, and give them genuine good advice. One of the reasons why I was totally cool with teaching, not only because it was a good job and teaching something I love, but also my mission statement when I was a teacher was be the kid that, or be the person that you needed when you were 14. And so that's kind of always been my life goal. Be the person that I needed when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, when I was at my most vulnerable, when I was at my most tumultuous. Who did I need? What did I need to be said to me? And so when I got into this, a lot of it was I feel like I got important things to say.
Yeah.
And if I say it in the void, well, I said it, somebody could come across it. Maybe they makes a difference, right? And I've always told myself that if I ever got a platform of any kind, I would use it to one, stand up for people who are facing injustice,
Yep.
two, speaking truth and life into people rather than tearing them down. Everybody's valuable. Everybody has something valuable to say. Um, it's your job to parcel through that, right? There's nuance to that to a certain extent, but people matter. The person matters. You're not just talking to an account, you're talking to a person behind that screen, right?
Absolutely.
So when I got into doing this, that was kind of my mission statement, was say what I want to say. And I never got the chance to talk about comics. I used to talk about comics in my class all the time. Spoiler alert, I stopped teaching because it's very hard, and
Yeah.
I am not the person for it, evidently. But I truly believe that someone will take something from what you say, and you never know who's watching. And so as a person who, I feel like I'm an old 26, like I'm not that old, but I feel like I'm older than I really am.
I feel that.
Um, I've lived a lot of life.
Yeah, me too. I feel
uh,
that, man.
like I always thought if you're younger than me, or even if you're a little older than me, you can learn something from what I have to
Oh, yeah.
say. I can still give you advice, right? And so I used to talk about comics. A lot of kids that I taught started getting into comics, specifically when like um it's not into Across the Spider-Verse came out. A lot of which I still haven't seen, weirdly enough.
Oh,
Weird blind spot. I don't
gotta
know.
watch that, man.
Dude, I'm a hipster in the sense that if it's too popular, I won't go see it. Unfortunately.
I only
Um,
watch obscure films.
yeah, I try
Or-
not to be that person, but there's a certain level of that still inside me. I will watch it at some point in my life. I didn't see Into the Spider-Verse until like 2021. So I mean, I still waited forever to go see that. But
My
um
brother's the same way. He'll watch Seven Samurais a million times, but he'll never watch the new stuff.
my favorite movie is The Thing. John Carpenter's The
Oh,
Thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I watch that a lot. And same with Catch Me If You Can. Steven
Oh,
Spielberg's Catch
I
Me If
have
You Can from
nasty taste in films,
2002.
so you don't even want to hear my favorite film. So
We'll talk later about that.
yeah,
We
yeah,
don't
yeah,
need to put that out in the ether.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
No judgment.
but when Across the Spider-Verse came out, I had students who would message me. Like I've had students keep in contact with me since I left. And they'll message me randomly and email me, and they'll go, "Hey, I picked up this book because I went and saw this movie, and it's super cool. Can you tell me anything I need to know about it? Or I really liked this character. What can you tell me about this character?" Dude, that made my heart sing. The fact that they just even asked me some innocuous advice, like,
Yeah,
dude, I get to tell you something and you value my opinion, like that means so much to me. So when I started my account, I really wanted to just speak, and whoever listened, maybe they got something out of it. At time of recording, I'm just over 270 followers, which is more than
congrats.
I thought I'd ever get,
That's
let
awesome.
alone yeah, I'm still growing every day. But I also don't make content for the algorithm. I know some content creators. I don't want to be harsh on their content. They make what they want to make, and they
Yeah,
make it for the algorithm sometimes, and their goal is fame or to make it a career. That's fine. That's not
yeah.
my goal. My main dream would be to be a writer who just lives comfortably off of his stories and books and comics, and like gets to just exists somewhere. Wherever he chooses to be, he can be because he lives comfortably. It's my dream. I don't care about
That's
much.
awesome.
I'm a simple man.
Yeah.
But I started growing and I realized like I don't want to do ranking videos. I tried to do some news videos as news was breaking about castings for Superman Legacy specifically. They got okay views, but I just like didn't care. My heart wasn't in it to
Yeah.
constantly be watching headlines and reporting on them. I didn't want to rank video games. I didn't want to rank suits. I didn't really want to do some of that content. And the content creators that I know that are even in that Discord server that we are in, they're great and they make great content and they make that sort of content. But I just felt it wasn't me. It
Yep.
wasn't what I wanted to make. It felt like a strain to make. I had some in my drafts that I would do, and I was just like, nah, I can't post it. It's not me. It feels fake. Um, and so what I realized is I really like the analysis, the textual analysis of comics, and even just giving reviews, recommending things to people because I feel like I have good comic taste. Even though I'm easy to please, I still read
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
books. I like to think. Um, and so I really just started analyzing comics proper. It's really easy to get bogged down in comic book movies or figures or comic book news or comic book video games. That's great. There's a place for all of that. But in today's media landscape, how many people are talking about comics proper? How many people are talking about the actual physical comic that you go to your LCS to pick up?
Handful.
To
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
in this microcosm, a lot because we know a lot of
Yep.
these people. We have mutual friends and we know these people, right? But comicbook.com isn't writing about comic books.
No.
Bleeding Cool is barely writing about comic books, right? Like, um, we are not in a position where comic books, as they are proper, are cool. And so I really wanted to speak on the textual analysis of that. And if somebody liked what I had to say or realized the depth that's in comics, then I got something out of it. And I recently got a comment from the person I've named dropped before, Hot Tub Homies, who is a new comic book reader, immigrant to America.
Oh,
I don't know where from. Like I should find that out. They commented that one time, and I was like, oh, that's super cool. And I should follow up on that. I don't know much
find
about
out.
them.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know how old they are. I don't know whether they're male, female, non-binary. Like I don't know. So I should probably ask. But they commented one for my recommendations about the X-Men, like I mentioned before, and I was so elated. I was so proud of myself that
Yeah.
I could speak to this person and say, "Hey, these are what you should read. Like this is cool. These are what you should know." That was really cool. And then they commented on that same video after I responded with a video of my own that I was their favorite account on TikTok.
Oh,
And I
wow.
know that's one person, and that could be lip service. Like they might not mean that. I really hope they do because they're very nice and they comment on my
Yeah.
videos all the time, and they seem like a very lovely person. Um, that meant so much to me. Like I cried. Like I
Oh, wow.
legitimately
Yeah.
teared up when I got that comment. And I haven't gotten a lot of hate, which is awesome. I don't feel like I make content that people love to argue with, even
Yeah.
though I'm an
Me
arguer.
too. Fingers
I
crossed.
will. Yeah. Here's to hoping the trolls don't come after me
Yeah.
now. But I love to argue about stuff. I love to debate, but I don't feel like what I talk about on my TikTok account is argue worthy. I think it's like open to discussion, but there's no argument there. Like we are just discussing. And I always said I didn't want to be. I made very clearly early on to state that I don't want snark. My job isn't to be snarky. There's enough of that, and I will say openly, I'm a hater by nature, and I fight it every day. Uh,
I
one,
feel that.
I can keep my hate to myself. I don't have to put it out there. And the thing that I'm putting out there, I refuse for it to be the hate that I feel.
Yeah.
I will not I will not be responsible for putting that out into the world. It's my responsibility to feel what I feel, and it's my responsibility to gatekeep what I feel and what I choose to let out there. And so I always have said my account is a place for positivity. If you don't like what I say, that's great. We just disagree. If I am being snarky or if I'm being a hater, someone's free to call me out on it, dude. Like I want it to be open source, man. I'm not no man is an island. We are all meant to live and cohabitate and help each other out. And so one thing that's what I really love about you, about the comic community, love about you, who you two are my closest friends on Comic Talk, and uh, the community that we're a part of, all the creators. I mean, that Discord was started a week ago, not even, and it just went gangbusters, man. Like it
Yeah.
exploded. There's tons of people in it now, and the amount of people we get to talk to. And my friend TS, who can be Kill Comics, he's a great resource to just talk comics with, and he's a good dude. And that's the thing. Like you guys are good people,
Mhm.
and when you find a group of people that one share the same interests as you, but they hold you accountable, and they are good people themselves, actively putting out love and positivity in the world, you can't go wrong, man. Like I love our community, I love our friendships, and I think that was really why I started this account
Yeah.
that I have. I have a YouTube channel. I haven't put a single video up on it yet because I am lazy and nervous and anxious, and I'm a
We got to
person
get you started on that.
who feels like, hey man, I can't put up something until it's really good.
Yeah. Throw it into
TikTok's
the
a little
void like I
easier.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, TikTok's a little easier. It's short form
Oh, yeah.
content. With long form content, I really want it to be well done, well crafted, well
Totally understand.
researched. So that's me, man.
Yeah.
I'm kind of what you see is what you get, you know.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And, it kind of brings me back to something me and you who talked about when we had our discussion, which is, I am very deliberate about what I speak about on my platform. And the reason for that is there's a generalized reason, which is like I try to spread love, preferably, because I feel like there is more than enough hate out there for people who are looking for that. God bless you.
Absolutely.
Have a blast. But my thing was there's a logical side to it too, which is so much of content that is put out or resources or whatever thrive on conversation. Conversation could translate to sales, whatever. And so I breathe life into and try to push and try to talk about and support things that I love. And if there's something that I don't love, I do not speak about it because they have this phrase about like things die in the darkness, basically. So like if
Mm-hmm.
there's honestly something that I bump into that I'm like, what, I don't like this, I'd probably maybe even rather not exist. I'm not going to speak about it. I'm not going to give it energy because I really do think, and not to get mystical on you, but I do think like when you put energy into things feed off of that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's how I feel like these hate mobs grow, and I feel like it's totally possible in the other direction too. It's just a lot of people don't want to feed it. I think a
Mm-hmm.
love mob could totally take over in the same way as a hate mob. I don't think that there is something intrinsic to toxicity and hate that makes it unique in that way. I just feel like the internet can feel that way at times and people don't
Yeah.
feel the need to invest it. And I'm just trying to do my small part of pushing it in that direction, just a little resistance as much as I can
Yeah.
to try
Yeah.
to flood things with love if possible.
I also understand, like, I'm just one man.
Yeah,
Like I am a voice in the sea of millions,
totally.
billions of voices. And I've always also felt that in recent years, analyzing and realizing, like, being a white man in America, a straight white man in America,
Yeah.
I have a louder voice than most. And actually literally too, I'm a very loud person.
Yeah.
But people listen to who they want to listen to. And I kind of alluded to it earlier. Like, unfortunately, people tend to listen to me rather than person of color who may be way more knowledgeable or experienced.
Yeah.
And so I do really try not to speak on something I'm not educated on, at least a little
Totally.
bit. Or if I do, I try to steer clear of things I'm not clear on, and then I ask for education. I say, hey, if I'm wrong, let me know.
Totally.
Let's talk about it. Help me learn, from you. And just being one man, being one person, um, it's really translated into my life is like it's my job to offer mutual aid to people. It's all
Oh
about
yeah.
me and my community. Why should I
Absolutely.
rely on anybody else except myself to help people? When I was a kid, the thing that attracted me to comic books and superheroes is that they were helping, even though it gave them nothing.
Yeah.
They were risking their lives to do those things. Now, I'm not brave enough to be in the military. I'm not brave enough to be in a job where I could get assaulted every single day or robbed or anything. Like, I'm not a healthcare worker who faces crazy amounts of viruses and sicknesses and diseases every day and fights them, keeps people alive. Like, I'm not that. What I am is a dude who can give some positivity to some people, and if that helps keep them going, I've done at least what I can do. And I'm humble enough to admit that I'm just one person. I can only do so much. That little bit of resistance that you're talking about, like that's all I can give, and I'm going to give it.
But the good thing is, that's where collective action comes in. We're all just one until we're working together. And then
Yeah,
there's a hell of a lot more than just one. And then you could see some real change because, we've seen it in the other direction. All it takes is one voice yelling some mean stuff into the void. It is what it is.
yeah,
But it adds up, and it could add up totally in the other direction as well. Okay, cool. So to just kind of cap things off, had an amazing discussion. I always like to do a little last minute pivot at the end because we all have interest outside of comics as well. And I think you're a little bit of a music head, just like me. You see the vinyls
I
behind me. I'm
am.
a big music head. So I
Yep.
wanted to ask, like, let's keep it broad at first, and then we can kind of go deeper than that. Genres. What are you into? What are you listening to?
Yeah. Musical genres, honestly, I'm an everyman. I listen to
Okay, cool.
everything. I'm not really all that picky. I think I was when I was younger for whatever
Mhm.
reason. Like I was so much pickier and I was harder to please and I was pretentious. And I'm not even talking like when I say younger, I'm not just saying like when I was like 9. I'm talking about like till I was like 21. I was so like worried about like what other people thought being in the zeitgeist, and now I just realized like I'm gonna listen to what I want to listen to. I don't really care what
Same.
people think. So when I was in middle school was really one of my first introductions to like hip hop, which was Wu-Tang Clan. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I really love the Wu-Tang Clan. I remember in listening to the conversation you had with Yoo-Hoo a couple weeks back and being like wanting to interject, in this conversation I'm not even a part of that. I saw an interview with Method Man where he was talking about how one of the reasons he loved comic books and it resonated with him so much when he was a kid was because very similar reason to me was people doing good for good reasons
Yeah.
and to help everyone. And that was one of the reasons Method Man loved comics, and he felt seen and he felt heard. And with the mask, anybody can be that person behind the mask. And those are obviously very admirable things about comic books, but he really loved those. And so a lot of their rhymes are obviously about martial arts and
Yep.
you know Chinese films as well as Japanese samurai films. And um so a lot of that resonated with me weirdly enough when I was a kid, even though I knew less about that stuff. As I got older, though, I realized my favorite rapper is DMX, and
Oh,
he
wow.
just
I love
something
that.
about his voice, about what he rhymes about, is just sticks with me. He's my favorite, but like I don't think he's the best, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I understand there are more technically skilled rappers. Um, when it comes to rap music in general, like I posted about Lamb Over Rice the other day. We talked about you commented on it. We talked about it.
Love
Uh,
Bronson.
I love Suicide Boys. I love Freddie Dredd. I'm a big
A
Freddie Dredd fan.
Suicide Boys fan. I
Yeah, so
love it.
when I went to I was gonna go to see Suicide Boys on August 30th, and where I
Oh,
live in
wow.
Florida was not gonna get hit by the hurricane,
Yep.
but the hurricane was gonna hit Tampa, and that's where they were the night before. so
Oh, okay.
so they canceled the Florida dates and rescheduled them. So as of time of recording, I have to wait till November to go see them. Maybe if you're watching this in November, I would have already seen them because I'll see them November 4th in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
But it was I love Suicide Boys. I remember when they first started coming out, and I really into it, but I kind of it was looked down upon. Like people still look down on Suicide Boys as like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
you're an idiot if you listen to them. Like they don't make sense. And
Yeah. I had a
it's one of those
t-shirt
things
that I
like,
remember used to cause issues every time I'd go out. The
yeah.
dirtier,
Well,
nastier
also they're
suicide. Yeah.
yeah, all their names,
Yeah. Yeah. It was
the
crazy.
fact that it's Suicide Boys and they rap about drugs and killing people, like
I was
I don't
younger.
even tell. I'm 26 and I don't even tell my parents I listen to Suicide. I didn't tell them I was going to the concert. I just said I'm going to a rap group's
They
concert. They're
probably
like,
wouldn't love
who?
that.
I'm like, who? I'm like, I don't. I'm not telling you. Like, just
Like,
stop
all right.
asking. But when I was younger, rap music, I listened to a lot of classic rock because that's what my
Yep.
dad listened to. I listened to a lot of top 40 stuff, not really much. And then when I was in early high school, I found punk rock and heavy metal and hardcore.
Okay.
And that really influenced a lot of who I am as a person. Not necessarily the straight edge lifestyle. Like I am straight edge in the sense that like I don't really drink, I don't really do drugs,
Yeah.
but I eat like garbage, so it's just as bad. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you know, helping people, community action, community aid. And
Yep.
it didn't really gel completely until I was in college where I realized the politics behind what I was listening to.
Yes.
But through like metal hardcore, listening to a lot of like A Day to Remember,
Oh, yeah.
and then it kind of like pop punk, so like the Wonder Years, which is one of my favorite bands, and now like listening to quote unquote modern pop punk, kind of like the weirdly enough more punk than pop. It's like punk pop. Um, like Turnstile is like
Oh,
pop
their newest album,
hardcore.
Glow.
Yeah, I mean they're awesome.
Love that album.
Heart Attack Man, Hot
Yep.
Mulligan, Pup is one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
Pathetic Use of Potential, dude, love them. Their album, The End Is Here, is amazing. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. So I listened to a lot of everything, but as I got older, towards late high school, early college, I was listening to a lot of harder stuff, listen to a lot of rap, and then I realized like I thought it was so weak and cowardly and like pussy to like listen to folk music or like indie
Oh,
music. And I once I met Mrs. Comics Box, my fiance, soon to be wife, which actually by the time I see Suicide Boys will be my wife.
congratulations.
Thank you.
I just got my engaged myself. Look at us.
Nice. Look at us, dude. We're growing up, I guess.
Love that.
So she listened to a lot of like alternative rock, Young the Giant, Walk the Moon.
Yep.
One of her favorite bands at the time was Panic at the Disco. Not necessarily so much now, but our tastes have evolved since then. But when we started dating 6 years ago, when we were 20, um, like I was listening to hard stuff and she wasn't. And then she kind of influenced me, and I was like, "Oh, go because you want to go see them." And then I really enjoyed seeing those bands and really loved listening to their music, so much so that we saw Young the Giant not that long ago in
That's
July.
sick.
And
Yeah.
so they were amazing. And so I started listening to a lot of alt rock, indie rock. And then really one of my favorite bands emerged from that is when getting into folk music was Fleet Foxes. So one of my
Oh,
favorite
yes.
bands. And I really truly realized that like who cares what other people's opinion about your music taste is. Like you
Yeah.
can listen to whatever you want. And I stopped listening to popular rappers. Like honestly, I don't really listen to Kendrick Lamar, Drake. I never really was a big fan of Jay-Z. I respect him obviously for what he did for rap music, but that wasn't my jam. And I used to listen to pop rap. Like I used to listen to G-Eazy when I was in high school because like if that's all your friends are listening to or that's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
that's
Of
popular, like that's what
course.
you're gonna listen to. And then I realized very quickly that's so corny. And I was listening to Logic around the same time, and like it was like, no, it's kind of corny. J. Cole, I still respect and listen to, but a little less so now, you know.
Yeah.
And but I really found like when I found like YNJ and Spice Talking, like that really changed my mind about a lot of what rap was. Um, specifically YNJ Triple S. That song is amazing. And then Griselda,
Oh, of
which is
course.
as a rap fan now,
Of
if you don't bring up
course.
Griselda, you're not locked in, dude. You're not
Tweaking
dialed
out.
in. So um, Benny Conway and West Side, all massive respect for them, massive fan of them. And then we talked about Action Bronson. I was first introduced to Action Bronson when he on Baby Blue with Chance the Rapper.
Oh,
That was the
yeah.
song that really blew
It's like
up. And it's still,
2013-ish. Yeah.
yeah, I think it might have been a little later, probably, yeah, 2013, 2014, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I probably heard it a little after it had come out.
Mr. Wonderful album,
Um,
I think. Yeah.
yeah, actually the best song on that album is Falconry. Don't ask me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
best song. But I just started changing, started listening, and now I listen to everything. I used to hate EDM music. Now I listen to like electro, just electro stuff. I don't know the subgenres of electronic music, but I listen to a lot of stuff like that. Aphex Twin,
Ooh, yeah.
Portishead is really awesome.
From the
Industrial,
90s, yes.
yeah,
They're so
really
good.
really like Portishead. But honestly, I'm really into like late 90s early 2000s emo right now, so like The Promise Ring is one of my favorite
Oh,
bands
okay.
right
Yeah.
now. There's also another band called Boys Night Out that made like pop punk emo from early 2000s. They remind me a lot of Census Fail except without like all the screaming. But yeah, I listen to everything. I really do. I don't
I
feel
love
like you
that.
can really pin me down based on one genre, but I would say if you had to pick two genres that I am, it's like emo and hip hop. Those are the two that I listen to the most.
Got you. Yeah, no, it sounds like you're pretty much tapping on a lot of the same stuff that I am, because
Yeah.
our beginnings are probably different, because I had a really weird entry into music, because as I told you, I grew up very, very religious household. So I actually didn't really listen to quote unquote secular music until
Okay, I didn't
2000.
say that. I didn't
Oh,
say
so we
no.
maybe
So
did have
like
the same intro.
no, we very much did. I just wanted to seem a lot cooler
Yeah.
than I was. I didn't really listen to secular music till I was like 13 or 14.
I
Like
was
I did, I
yeah.
really almost
I was
my first
15,
introduction to
yeah.
rap music, I say it's Wu-Tang Clan. It was like Lecrae and KJ52. Do you know about them? You know about all that?
Yes, very
That
much
was my
so.
intro to rap music. I
Lecrae
just
was my
wanted to
first
sound,
yeah.
yeah, I wanted to sound a lot cooler than I
And
was.
nobody else knows who I'm talking about. So I tell everybody, oh yeah, I was a Tribe Called Quest, because yes, that was the
Yeah.
first rap group that I listened to, kind of like by choice, like my own choice, kind of like when I
Yeah.
spawned out. But yeah, no, I
And
started
that's
with
true for Wu Tang Clan. Like that
yeah.
is the exact same thing. Wu
My
Tang Clan was the
thing
first I chose to listen to.
exactly. Technically, in terms of what I was listening to first, it was Lecrae, Skillet, Thousand Foot Crutch, and Flyleaf was technically the first four things I was listening to.
Bro, add in like maybe switch out Flyleaf for Tadashi or Reliant K, and
Yeah,
that's a
Reliant K.
hundred percent.
Oh my
Reliant
god,
K, their
they're
first
actually
three
genuinely good though.
albums, yes, they are. Maybe not anymore, but
Well,
their
are they
first
still
couple
making
albums,
stuff? Maybe, but
yeah, they're it's like way it's
I'm
okay.
good.
It's
I'm good.
alternative, but it's not like
Yeah,
my
I
like
remember
it's different. But I dude, uh the
Switchfoot. I used
self-title.
to go crazy
I did
on.
like Switchfoot too. John
Yeah,
Foreman specifically is a really good songwriter. Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, continue. Sorry to cut you off.
No, of course, but like, and I remember it was of Mice and Men that were the first metalcore band that I heard that was secular, and I was blown away, because there's no direct Christian analog to that. So when I heard that, I was like, "Whoa!" Like
Yeah.
this, and so I went
Well,
from
but they're not too. Did you know that? Like they're technically not. Just like
not.
Attack Attack is technically not secular. Like they're technically a
Oh yeah,
Christian
they
band,
are technically Christian, aren't they?
but like they're not. Also, their lead singer
Maybe the
is a
members are
diddler.
like
So
practicing, but like not the
yeah.
music. But
Well, their lead singer is a diddler.
oh yeah, that's true, isn't it?
Is it Austin something?
Austin Carlisle.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yikes.
he got outed after he was
Yikes.
a
It's
pastor
hard to
too, which made
track.
it way
There's so many of
worse.
them now from that
Yeah,
scene.
no, you're
But
100% right. And honestly, if you are a victim of abuse, we do
oh,
take that
of
very
course.
seriously. And
Absolutely.
please reach out to anybody that is a trusted individual if you are dealing with those things. That is on a very serious note.
Yes, as a side.
But yeah,
But yeah,
I understand what you mean though.
from Of Mice and Men to I remember, yeah, Attack Attack. That whole metalcore scene at that time I was really into. Enter
What about
Shikari,
Bless the Fall?
Bless the Fall, all of
Yeah,
them. Asking Alexandria. Yeah. I went through that whole scene. I
Crab
went to Warped
Core,
Tour,
dude. Yeah,
and I was getting into rap at the same time. I only really gravitated towards mostly 90s stuff for the most part. Some early 2000s I got into. And then from that point onwards, I caught up on everything I missed. And
yeah,
then I exploded from there. I love I like electronic music, but my like in terms of recreate, because I always differentiate between like exploratory listening, like, oh, what is this? And versus like this is my go-to stuff. And go-to EDM music is like K-Tronada. So I like the intersection between electronic music and like R&B rap, like
yeah. It's because like K-Tronada is kind of like housey too,
exactly. I
but like
like
old school '90s
yeah,
house.
it's
Yeah,
bounce. Yeah, it's like
yeah,
bounce
yeah,
house.
yeah.
So I love that. Like that's my thing.
Mhm.
And then I listen mostly recreationally to a lot of R&B. And then I have my other side, which and this is like I hate to use the term guilty pleasure because I'm not guilty about it, but like
Yeah,
it's
yeah. No,
something
I
that
understand what you mean.
people are very surprised when they know that. I'm like really into any of that soft Phoebe Bridgers, soccer mommy, Biba Doobie
Snail mail.
beat,
Yeah.
snail mail, pale waves. I like all that. Like the
Wet leg, local natives. Yeah.
bruh, you're exactly all of that. I love that almost like light grunge, just a little flavoring of grunge in there.
Yeah. A little
Like
sprinkle of
I
paprika in
love that
there. Yeah.
stuff. I have a huge playlist that I listen like 200 plus tracks of just I've had the same ones in rotation since like 2018 and I listen to them constantly. Like
I want
Snail
to feel
Mail's
like a
love,
16-year-old girl who just got her heart broken.
literally. Yeah, like I put my little flannel on and my little PSL in my hand. I feel gorgeous.
I'll
But
be honest, like I've never thought that I was transgender or anything. Like I really haven't. But I feel like what really makes me connect with my inner woman is listening to like Soccer Mommy and Phoebe
I know what
Bridgers.
you're talking about.
Because if that's the female experience, like I'm here to
Beautiful.
feel it. Like I really want to
I
feel
like
that.
I like Boy Genius. I like all that
Ah,
Girl in Red. Oh my god.
girl, you're talking my language, dude. We are on
But
we
I
are on
love
the
all that.
same
Yeah,
wavelength,
I love all
100%.
that.
I
And it's
love it.
weird because like on the other hand, yeah, I love, don't get it twisted. I love my Griselda. I like
Oh,
38
I
Special.
want to hear about killing someone.
Nasty.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to hear about decapitation for
And it's
sure.
crazy
Yeah.
because like
In
I
multiple different genres.
I kind of come from that too. Like I where I grew up
Yeah.
was like a very rough neighborhood. So like so you would think like, but no, like there's like a part that's the dichotomy of man. Like I love the contrast and I love like strong left turns. I'm still very much into metal, but I always differentiate. I like metal core more than I like metal because I know metalheads is a whole different thing and I don't want to step on
Yeah.
their genre. I like really heavy stuff. So like Chelsea Grin, Lorna Shore, like really
Yeah.
heavy stuff.
Like
I like that.
deathcore,
Yeah,
right?
I like
Yeah.
death, the
Do you
intersection
like
between metal and
Fit for
deathcore.
an Autopsy?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I really like
And
Fit for an
then
Autopsy.
with hardcore, you mentioned hardcore. I've been sober for 3 years, so um, it was.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It was so important to me the when I discovered like DC hardcore stuff. So
Like
I'm
a
very much
Minor
into
Threat.
Minor Threat, Gorilla
Yeah.
Biscuits,
Yeah.
that era. That's what I'm most familiar with. I don't know too much about hardcore past like the 80s, to be honest with you.
Which is weird because I'm like an early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s
So
hardcore is what I
and
know
like
more.
I've heard some of the things. Like obviously, I know like Black Flag, and it keeps
Yeah,
going.
those transcend though.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
But
it almost isn't even hardcore at this point anymore. It's kind of like the Beatles aren't technically rock music anymore because it's just like
exactly, and
so different now.
and
They've
like
transcended.
modern hardcore, like technically, like I know Turnstile has that designation, but
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
they genre blend so much that I wouldn't even categorize them like that. So if you have modern punk stuff you want to put me onto, more than happy to. Oh, I
I'm trying to
love
think.
what is it? Crust punk or something like that. What is that?
Crust punk's its own thing, man. You might not want to delve too deep
No,
into
I've
that. You
listened to
might not
that.
take a shower
I've
for like
listened
8
to that.
years.
That is some grimy shit that I like. I like that
Yeah,
stuff.
that's true.
I
Well,
like
that's
that
why I
hobo
listen to
music.
like
Like
I
that
listen to
shit's
like
good.
Maxo Cream because I want to feel
Oh,
like
love
I'm
Maxo.
from the hood, but I'm not.
Yeah,
Which is
I
that
feel,
weird, like I don't
yeah.
know why I feel that way. At some point, someone somewhere made it feel cool,
I
and
think we're
now
the
I feel
opposites.
cool.
Like, yeah, that's why I listen to Snail Mail. That's me into my suburbs, like, because I'm not from there. So
We're
when
switching places.
yeah, like literally, like when I what I imagine a lot of like white boys experience when they hear Kodak Black is me when I hear Snail Mail, where I'm like, whoa, the suburbs, beautiful.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I grew up in an area. The town that I'm in is very diverse, but it's
yeah,
mostly lower middle to upper middle class. Like it's
yeah,
true middle class.
yep.
But it borders the town that at one point was number 50 in murders in all of the
Oh
United States.
wow,
And so I grew up with friends who are from there, friends
yep,
who are from Broward County, where Kodak Black and Lamar
yeah,
Johnson are from.
definitely heard
Like,
a lot about there. Yeah,
um, I've been there. Like I've done church mission trips to actually like help food banks there and stuff. I've seen
gotcha.
it. Weirdly enough, and this is like lore that like isn't applicable to anything about me now. But
Deep lore,
when I was in high school, my parents were missionaries to Haiti, and so every summer I used to live in Haiti. So I've seen like real poverty, like and real
totally,
struggle.
totally.
So it's less about a fantasy and more about this is something that also makes me feel sort of familiar.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I did when my freshman year of my high school, which my school by the time I was a senior was an A school, but which I don't know, you're from California, right? Like Holy.
no, I'm from Connecticut.
Okay, so Connecticut might be different, but they might
Yeah,
have like you have
Connecticut, and I live in
ABC,
Washington now. So
you have like ABC schools,
okay,
right? Like there are good schools and there are bad schools and they're
yep.
given a grading, right? By the time I left, it was an A school. When I first got there, it was like a C school. And there were legitimate parts of like the corners of the courtyard where like gangs would hang out.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you weren't a gang member, like you didn't hang out there.
Yeah.
And there was gang activity. I mean, I saw kids selling drugs at school
Oh, of course.
every once in a while. I saw a lot of fights. I mean, that wasn't something that was necessarily foreign to me. So there is a sense of familiarity about it. It's not like
Totally.
I fantasize about being
Yeah,
in
you're not zooing it, you
struggling.
know,
Yeah,
looking.
like I yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, I think we have a lot of commonalities. And now I know I send you a lot of links here and there of like cool, weird, obscure stuff that I
Yeah,
find. I'm gonna start sending them your way so we can start
of course.
jamming over some
Of
wild
course,
stuff we
dude.
find.
Yeah.
But
Question for you, dude. I
yeah,
thought about this because I knew you were going to bring up music at some point.
yeah,
Do you know who Serengeti is?
no,
Dude, look him up.
Serengeti.
Serengeti, spelled with no H. Um, he is a rapper out of Chicago, indie rapper, alternative underground rapper. He has this one song called Dennehy, Dennehy, where he
Okay.
raps as like this Chicago alter ego of like this white Chicago dude. Think like Mike Ditka, right? Or like
Yep,
the
yep.
Dub Players, yeah, skit from SNL. It is one of the most creative songs I've ever heard, and it is fantastic. I think you'll love it.
Okay, just
He also has a
bookmarked it.
song. He also has a song called Critters that's super good.
Critters. Okay.
Um, and dude, he's amazing. I think you'd really like him. But that's so weird because I thought you would say, "Yeah, I'm totally familiar with him." I
I
didn't
know.
know
I
I'd
don't
be able to
know.
like stump you as somebody. That's awesome.
Music's broad, man. Like, and not to
It is.
mention,
It
as
really
I've
is.
gotten older, I always was afraid when I was younger that as I got older, my music taste would shrink. Naturally, I think that happens to a lot of people,
Mine's
where
gotten bigger.
mine too. But also my interest in listening to things because it's almost kind of like doing your homework listening. You know, everybody's like, listen to Radiohead. And I did all that. I went on to Rate Your Music and I listened to all the top 50
No,
rated, like,
I've literally only heard "Creep" from Radiohead. I'm a hipster in the sense that like I will not go listen to something that someone tells me is the best thing ever.
and
This is the
that's
best
no
artist
fun. So
ever.
I wouldn't
No, I'm not
suggest
gonna
you
do
do
it.
it. But these days, like I've very much fallen into like I will listen to pure bullshit. Like I spend a lot of time listening to nonsense that I like.
Yo, you fuck with Viper?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I
Yes.
love that kind of stuff.
Yo, I'm gonna send you.
RXK nephew, I love all that weird stuff.
I'm gonna send you a meme, a Viper
Send it.
meme. Uh, I think you'll really appreciate it.
But yeah,
If anything, dude, pause the video when you're editing this. Pause the video and put up the meme that I'm about to send you.
okay, I
Okay,
got you.
so
I got
this
right
is where
there.
you're gonna put it.
But yeah, no, I've gotten to definitely to a point where I just like I strive to be intrigued more than I care to necessarily hear like the best music being put out. Like I
Yeah,
definitely just like to be not entertained because I have my go-to music, which is again a lot of it's R&B. As I get older, I just listen to a lot more R&B
yeah.
because
Do you
I
like
take
Snow
showers.
Allegra?
Oh, I love snow. I love
Oh,
snow.
she makes me feel. If I had to put into words, I'm in the bath, I'm wine drunk, and I'm feeling sexy. That's
Yes.
what Snow Allegra makes me feel.
That's my aesthetic.
Yeah, dude, I love Snow Allegra so
Yeah, no,
much.
she
She's
and that's a
also
prime example of what I
beautiful,
listen to a
gorgeous,
lot.
so talented.
Absolutely.
Wish I was her, honestly, dude. Like she lives a great life, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's exactly the type of R&B I think I listen to the most. Like, and I'll listen to a little bit of toxic R&B too. Brent Fayez, he like is so toxic in the things he says. And I'm sitting next to my girl like, listen, I love you, babe, but like he's talking that talk right now. Not me.
Yeah,
I
dude.
don't feel that way.
No, 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 baby.
This
I'm
is
not
just
going out and
analytical.
impregnating 6 women.
Of
No,
course
not
not.
me. But my alter ego is.
But Brent,
He's
I love
yeah,
that for him.
yeah.
He
Dude,
likes it. I love it.
I wish he was doing that because like it makes him happy. It doesn't make me
Yeah.
happy. It makes him happy. So he's out doing that, you know?
I love
Yeah, come
love.
on, baby. Don't be like that. I
We
do
love
that
love
too.
in this house.
Yeah. No, my Mrs. Comics Box will never listen to the rap music I put on.
Oh yeah.
She or the R&B I put on because she will take it a little personally.
That's I think
She's
my
sensitive like that. But I mean, I think like rightfully so. Like if she put on like she puts on girl power music about leaving your man every once in a while, and I'm like, all right, let's turn this off
but part
after
of it
all.
you got to
You
chalk
know,
up to
but
him
it's
and be like,
like,
that's fair. That's fair.
you know, fair's fair. You know,
Yeah,
same,
to an
same.
extent, I feel like that's the small in my armor of like I'm progressive, but I consume things that are not at times.
Oh
You
yeah,
know what
dude.
I mean?
Like, so like I talked about this before. Is like there's a certain level of separating art from the artist. Like DMX, like his song "Where the Hood At." There's a
Oh yeah,
whole super homophobic section of that song.
yeah.
I
He
can't
would
change
go.
that.
Yeah,
I can't change that. That song is like once I kind of realized what he was saying. I've talked about it before on my channel too. There's a certain edginess phase you go through if you're specifically a white teen boy in the
I was a
early
Tyler
to
Creator
mid
fan, so I get
2000s.
it.
Yeah, same
Bastard
struggle.
and Goblin. Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
that time.
same struggle, just in a little bit different ways. But like, there's
Yeah,
a certain level of like racism, homophobia, misogyny that you just excuse,
yeah,
and you, whether you agree with it or not, you do kind of engage with it. And that was one of those things that like, I didn't see a problem with it. Whatever, it wasn't me. Who cares, right? And then I got to a point, probably around 19 or 20, where I was like, I can't even listen to the song anymore. Like, it's ruined for
yeah,
me. And I by now I've realized, like, dude, you can only do so much about an artist, and like, you can still enjoy their music and understand what it was doing, um as art, not that you have to agree with it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he's dead, so it's not like I'm giving him my money.
Yeah, and for me, it's nuanced. Like, I've never been firmly on the separate the art from the artist, because I think there are limitations to that
I
naturally.
agree.
So like R. Kelly, I think his music and his crimes are intrinsically tied together for
Yes,
me. I can't speak to everybody,
1000%.
but for me,
Yes,
when you're talking
100%.
about I'm going to do this to her, when I know that there was a younger woman on the other side of that, I can't do that mental
I think
separation. You know what I mean?
my separation really begins and ends at like, did you, one, commit domestic violence,
Yeah.
and two, did you sexually assault somebody?
Yeah. It's what did you say
and
versus
one,
what did you do is the big
and
differentiator.
I don't even really care if they're bragging about things like that in a song. Well, one, I do care. I wouldn't listen to music that did brag
Yeah,
about
of
those things, but
course.
um they may not have those lines in songs. But if I find out that you did that as an artist, I'm not going to listen to you. Like,
Absolutely.
I stopped listening to, and this is a more minor example, but like the band Brand New,
Oh,
the lead
yeah.
singer,
Yeah.
he never, as far as I know, he never technically did anything, but like, he was messaging underage girls. Well, like, I'm not going to support that.
Yeah, no, I don't rock with that.
And
Yeah.
it took me a long time to even revisit one of those albums. And then I did, and was like, still some of my favorite albums. It really sucks. And it's like, that one is really hard for me. And that's a more minor example, because he still technically didn't even like physically do anything, but it's still creepy. It's still gross. It's still, do I want to support that guy? He could have changed. Like, that's the thing. People do technically change, but it's like,
Yeah.
did you really? And did you only change because you got caught? Like, that's, I don't know. It's very nuanced. I think you're 100% right that there's a
Yeah.
ton of nuance when it comes to separating art from the artist. But mine really begins and ends at domestic violence, sexual assault, things like that.
Yeah. Like I
I
think
will never listen to you.
I think I leave space for like artistic expression when it comes to words. Now I understand like there is a limit to that, absolutely. But yeah, it's action that you so if you said something not great in the 90s, like that, you shouldn't have said that. That was never okay, totally. But like to a certain extent, that I always make that differentiator. But then yeah, it is a hard game to play, because like one of the most um iconic rappers of all time, Biggie Smalls, he had serious domestic violence issues. Like,
Yeah.
how do you tackle that? So, like, I think it's an interesting thing to do, where it's like I just try to be the best I can on a case by case basis. I try
Yeah.
not to pad the pockets of people who I find unsavory, and there's probably going to be people who slip through the cracks every once in a while, and something's going to slip on, and I'm like, oops, that was a Chris Brown feature. My bad. But
Yeah.
like, you try
Yeah.
your best.
I think there's also, if that person's dead, eh,
Yeah,
I'm
because
not
if
giving them
anything,
my
you're feeding
money.
the estate, and that's their families. And should the
And that's
families
not
get
necessarily them.
penalized?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's not them. Yeah.
yeah.
So with people who are dead, it's a lot easier. Like
Oh,
DMX. So
totally.
I can justify that, right?
Oh, yeah.
But if I found out that Freddie Dredd is a creep and abuser, all his music's getting deleted out of my library, and I'm never listening to him again. Like, that's the reality. I love Freddie Dredd. He's one of my favorite
Yeah,
rappers, but like, I just wouldn't, because you got to take a stand somewhere. And if you, nah, that saying's been perverted. I'm not gonna say it. I was gonna say something like, yeah, if you don't stand for anything, you fall, or like, you stand for nothing, you fall for anything, or something. That's been perverted in
totally.
today's day and age.
Yeah,
So I'm not going to say that in earnest,
yeah,
but you got to have some sense of morals and principles and stuff. But outside of music, if you want to talk about other interests, I'm interested to
totally.
see, are you into sports?
Oh, so this is a massive hole in my knowledge for people. I am
Really?
not a sports guy, not by choice. Is that wasn't popular in my house. It was very much gospel or nothing type of house. And so
Fair
next thing
enough.
you know, I entered adulthood and I just don't know much about it. So like I like MMA a lot. I like watch a lot of matches,
The
boxing here
most
and there.
anti-Christian sport, I
Yeah,
guess.
literally. I I catch lots of clips of basketball and football here and there, but like I don't. You want to talk about an inaccessible thing? You want to talk about comic runs?
No, dude.
How do
No, no,
you
no.
jump into sports? I don't
No,
know.
dude.
I have
Well,
no clue.
you have to have a Gandalf or a Dumbledore in your
Somebody's
life.
got to break it down. Yeah,
You have to have a Professor X to guide you into sports. And I could
literally.
be that. I could be that
Yeah,
Professor
you're
X
gonna teach me
if
about
you
sports.
want me to. The one with hair and a beard. But I truly believe that sports is accessible to everybody. Now, sports communities may not be. And I want to preface that there is a lot of racism, homophobia,
Oh, totally.
misogyny, transphobia, hatred, and bigotry that is in sports culture as a fan base.
Yeah.
But that's because it also takes everybody from everywhere. And even though it being the great uniter, people will still be bigoted. So
Totally.
I want to preface that. But I think sports is one of my hugest things as well. One of my other big interests. I'm into gaming. I'm into anime. I'm into manga. Things like that. Anime less so in recent years, but
Yeah.
I love sports. Like I am a huge sports fan. Growing up, my dad loved sports. He watched every sport, so I watched every sport. I would consider myself a near expert on the NFL. I am
Oh,
a very, very good baseball fan. I'm pretty to really good on hockey because I'm a huge Florida Panthers fan. And I'm a Dodgers fan. I like the Cowboys because Mrs. Comics Box family loves the Cowboys. I'm personally a Saints fan at heart.
okay.
Huge Dodger fan, huge Florida Panther fan. They're the home team. And I love basketball as a sport, but I don't really have a team I support. But I
Gotcha.
love all the sports. Like I feel like I'm really, really knowledgeable about the game of football and the game of baseball specifically. Those are the two sports I know the best. And I love them. Dude, there's something about sports that like you saying you didn't grow up with sports and you're not into it and you just like catch clips here and there, that to me is so foreign
I
because
think that's to a lot of
I
people, to be
live,
honest.
no, but I live in a state of like, I have two fantasy football leagues going on.
Yeah.
I want to do fantasy baseball next season, which is an everyday, multiple times a day thing. I have sports memorabilia. I'm huge. Here, for example, right sitting right next to me, Juan Pierre's signed bat from the
Ooh.
2003 Miami Marlins World Series team. Juan Pierre is one of my favorite players of all time. Signed bat, right? I have signed pucks from Hall of Famers. I have signed bobbleheads. I am a fiend for sports. I love sports so much. It's so funny because Yoo-Hoo said the same thing. I was talking to him, like, not
Is he
for
not a sports
content
guy
or
either?
anything. No, he hates sports. Like he
Oh, he
never
hates
grew
it.
up
You
with
see, I
them.
like it. I just don't know about it.
He said the only thing that he would was into at all, even a little bit, was soccer.
Oh,
And it's because his family's from England. So like that
I
was
like
their thing.
tennis. I like watching tennis a lot.
Tennis is pretty cool. But I'm into like golf, football, basketball,
Yeah.
baseball, hockey, tennis. I like tennis. I don't
Yeah.
know much about it. But like I actually really love golf. I like going golfing. Like I'm dude, all sports,
Yeah.
all me, dude.
You gotta put me onto
You
sports then.
bro, dude, just FaceTime me after this and we can talk sports all you want, dude. Ask me whatever question. Actually, it'd be so much better to just go to a sports game for a
Just
specific
into the
sport and
deep end, huh?
explain it to you. Like you live in Washington, right? Do you live anywhere near Seattle?
I used to. I know the
Okay, but
Seahawks are
like,
huge down
but you
there.
could go to a Mariners, a Kraken, or a
Yeah.
Seahawks game within a
Yes.
reasonable distance, dude. I went to Seattle last summer. I promise you, at some point in the next year or two, I will go back to Seattle so we can go to a game.
Sure.
I
Sure.
promise you, dude.
I'm
I
totally
will
down.
do it because I
You have to
love
explain it
sports
to me.
that much. I'll explain it to you, dude. I may not know any players on the Kraken. I'll know a few players on the Mariners and the Seahawks because I'm not those fans, but I promise you, dude, it'd be so fun. It's so fun to go. Or you come to Florida and I can tell you everything you need to know about the Panthers, dude.
Well, my girl's family's down there, so
Rosters.
we might be able to work something out.
Hey, we'll talk after. We'll
Yeah.
talk
We'll
after.
talk shop after.
Sounds good.
All right, but thank you so much for coming on the show. We had
Dude,
a nice long
thank
episode.
you. All right. I hit you up to be on here. One, love hearing myself talk. I've said that multiple times. Two, you are an amazing guy, and I want to see your platform grow.
Appreciate you.
And I love talking anything that you want to talk about. So this week was X-Men. Dude, whenever you want to have me on again, you pick a comic book and we'll talk about it. And maybe, just maybe, if you let me pick the topic and run it, dude, I'll learn you something.
Oh,
How
I
about
like
that?
that. I like that.
Maybe we'll do it on my channel instead.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll flip it, but we'll just do a JTC that's like hosted by Zach's Comics Box.
When you're up and running, you let me know.
Yeah, you take care of everything, and I'll just like move it to my channel, and maybe I'll run the show a little bit. But
I like it.
We'll figure it out.
But yeah, no, we're gonna definitely run it back. I'm gonna run it back with Yoo-Hoo too. We go Yoo-Hoo Part 2 is on the way.
What about all three, dude?
I was thinking that I had the wheels turning. I was like, you know what? Three.
Yes,
that's serious. Dude, that's serious talk.
I'll text them right after we're done, and I'll tell them that's what we're doing at some point.
No, that is
promise me before the end of the year.
Absolutely. Before
the end of October.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do it whenever.
Bro, I'll do it next week. If you want next week's podcast to be me, you, and Yoo-Hoo, I will do it. I will coordinate it, dude.
Put it on the record. If he's available, we can do it.
Dude, I'll text him right now. I actually know his days off, so once we're done recording, we could talk.
All right, cool. But no, absolutely, we're gonna run this back. Thank you so much for the second conversation. We're gonna definitely have more to come. Very excited about this. Who, if anything, you'll be like on DJ Vlad's channel where he has the reoccurring guests. You'll be like Boosie on this channel. Just always
Can't wait. I can't wait. Thank you again for having me on here. You are such an amazing person. I love being able to talk to you. I can't wait for us to continue this conversation, even just in real life.
There's more to talk about too.
Oh, we could have viewers at home. I know we're trying to wrap this thing up.
And you thought this was long. Just wait.
But we could have spent we didn't even get to my favorite X-Men runs.
We didn't talk about
that was on the
games.
Yeah, we didn't talk about games. We didn't talk about movies. We didn't talk about any other comics that
we didn't have movies.
There were like 5 or 6 things that we could have kept talking about. They were on the docket that we didn't even talk about. That's coming. We are a wellspring of random things to talk about. I don't think the viewers at home really know. I don't think they get it. I don't think they understand. But stay tuned and you will see.
Just wait on it. Take off ad lib. All right. Till next time, this is Jabril. I'm here with Zach Comics Box. Thank you so much for being with me. Until next time.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good one, bud.